Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Transatlantic Call-In Show. This is the place where you guys get to call in and talk to two trans people about all of your questions, anything and everything trans-related. So, you know, whether you are an ally with a trans friend and you have an uncomfy question, it probably wouldn't be appropriate to ask them, but you want to ask somebody, we're here. Or if you maybe have concerns about like the CAS report or trans kids transitioning or, whether or not teachers using their kids' pronouns counts as practicing medicine. We are here to answer all of those questions from serious to ridiculous. I'm steering your ship today, but with me is, of course, always appreciated Dr. Ben. What's up, Dr. Ben?
What's up? I'm here. I'm wearing my glasses today because I had to get my eyes dilated, so I might not be able to read all the super chats super clearly. Just stick with me. We're gonna have a good time today. Let's get some callers. Our lines are open. Get your calls in. Especially if you're gonna sit out there in the side chat and tell us that we don't deserve rights or that biological sex matters when you go to the bathroom, etc. Get out of the side chat. Call in because we're gonna ignore you in the side chat. But we'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, we've had a few good callers in the last few months who I thought we had good conversations with and said they would call back, but they haven't. So I think like Barma was one who I think we could have gone further on that conversation. I was just editing that video, which is the only reason why I remember. I don't remember all the details, but if you're watching, call in. We'd love to continue that conversation. Or like Dean from Australia, who was kind of in like I accept trans people's bodily autonomy to kind of live their life how they want, but I don't necessarily understand identity as like a concept kind of thing. So like, I think those are like interesting conversations. And I hope we could maybe get to some of those, because I think those are the ones where we see the most progress and the most like meaningful discussion happening, where it's like, we don't necessarily all agree. There's ground to cover, but you're not starting off from the beginning thinking that we are less than and deserving of less rights than you, which is always a rough starting point. We will talk to you if you are in that position, but I can't promise I'm going to be your best friend when the call's over. Anyway, we have a poll from last week we're going to talk about real quick, and then we'll read you guys out the poll for this week, and I'll put that in the chat. So last week's poll read, do you think trans people mean they are literally born in the wrong body, or is it simply a metaphor? With 9.4 thousand votes, 66% said it's a metaphor, and 34% said it's literal. Now, we had a little bit of an argument here in the super chat section last week about exactly. So I've understood some of the counter arguments since then. I made the mistake of thinking that because the literal interpretation is incoherent, as far as I can tell, like the notion of a right or wrong body seems to kind of suggest some like the existence of some ideal in reality that you're like trying to work towards. And I feel like that's more of just like a concept, not like a literal thing. But some people believe in stuff like that. So I guess it's fair to say that, not speaking on behalf of the entire trans community, some percent might mean it literally. However, of those I've talked to, it always seems to be more of a metaphor to me, like a metaphoric ideal, like not suggesting there's wrong bodies and there's right bodies, but there's this body feels right to me is kind of the impression I usually get. So I don't know, Ben, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think logically speaking, it's best as a metaphor, because I do think that the argument is it's incoherent if you're using it literally, but also it communicates some misinformation if people think that you mean it literally. Mm-hmm. And so if you can communicate that it's a metaphor, I think it's easier for people to understand that this isn't the exact experience we're talking about, but this is a way that I can make it make sense to you. It's like when we talk about chemistry, like if something is hydrophobic, it's not literally that a molecule is afraid of water. Like they don't have feelings. Like a lot of things personify or whatever, they don't actually have feelings, but it's a way we understand a concept. So
Right.
I tend to view this as more of a metaphor, but I mean, as the community is not a monolith and everyone has their own way of communicating their experiences, some people may have experience closer to a literal being in the wrong body.
Mhm.
But yeah, I can see kind of both arguments there, but I would stick to the metaphorical side of it.
Yeah, I understand people saying they feel like their body is wrong. Like that makes sense to
Mhm.
me and is different from claiming that your body literally is wrong. Like bodies can't be wrong or
Right.
right, they just are, as far as I can tell. But
Exactly.
I also, maybe this metaphor is useful to you. I only got it because I didn't say it last week because I was almost at the end and I don't want to give you guys any spoilers, but I was watching the show Lost and that's where this kind of example came from, that when people have spinal tumors, like a character happens to on the show, I'm not gonna. That's as far as if that's a spoiler. Sorry, as far as it goes. Um, an example they gave is that feeling like there's when there's a tumor in your spine, that it feels like you're walking on pins and needles, like pressing against the nerve, and it's like that's obviously not them saying that it is like creating needle pricks in their feet. It's saying like the sensation is as if that, and that's kind of where I was trying to draw the comparison from, but.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's just TV and pop culture or if that is like a literal thing.
Oh yeah, no, and that is the way people describe that experience, because you do get like numbness and tingling in
Mhm.
your feet, but yeah, it doesn't actually cause a. It doesn't like, and even the mechanism is different because you're not actually stimulating the pain receptors in your feet. Those are not
Right.
stimulated; they are just not functioning. So yeah, it's a
Mhm.
similar metaphor, and I do agree that this to kind of like what you were alluding at with the um idea that there's some kind of purpose for a body, like if
Mhm.
this is the wrong body, then it was like like it would have matched to have a different body, as if like you were meant to have a different body, or like designed to have a different body. Like it
Right.
kind of leads into some kind of creationist more religious language, and I know there are a lot of trans people that are religious, and maybe those might be some people more prone to think this literally, but I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I do understand why people might articulate it literally. And all this came from one of Trump's executive orders that was suggesting that gender ideology is incoherent because we dismiss sex as a useful concept. We don't. And we assert that somebody can be in the wrong sexed body. And I'm like, well, yeah, if you take it literally, that's incoherent, but that's not what is really being done as far as I can tell. But anyway, we've covered that some
Yeah.
people must clearly think that to some extent. I think they're wrong, but, or I think rather they're like not, they're confusing like the metaphorical and the literal in that sense. But anyway, we do have another poll this week that's also related to executive orders. This is going to be a lot of the next 4 years, folks, assuming that, you know, our show isn't forcibly taken off air. Um, so this week's poll reads, do you think that teachers using their students' pronouns or a different name could reasonably be considered practicing medicine without a license? So if you are up to date on what things are going on, you might know this. We are going to put this poll in chat and then come back to this after a few calls. But yeah, you guys can get involved in this discussion in chat. It's slightly different in chat because there's a text limit, but it means the same thing. Anyway, Ben, are you ready to take some calls?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Let's see. I think maybe we can start with Mark in Scotland. Conversation sounds interesting.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. Mark, he, him in Scotland wants to know, besides propaganda, what leads people to be transphobic. So this is an interesting conversation. Mark, you are live on the line with Arden and Ben. We're getting a lot of background sound.
Oh, okay. I don't know why. There's nothing going on here that's causing background.
I'm hearing the show in the background.
It's the show.
Yeah, do you have the show playing in the background?
Yeah, sorry, I've shut that off now.
No worries. We're good. That's what it was. Thank you for helping us solve that problem. All right, Mark, what's going on?
Yeah. No bother. I mean, I said that my question was, I think, what causes, besides propaganda, what leads to transphobia? And I've got like a few thoughts that I would like to kind of express to frame that question properly, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, I think we both have thoughts, but go ahead. We'd love to hear you set it up for us.
Yeah, so obviously there's a lot of propaganda, and that is leading to a lot of transphobia as well. But I've also heard it suggested that that some people are led to transphobia, like by a kind of, I guess, visceral revulsion, you might call it, of the whole proposition. That's something I don't really personally understand. I'll give you a bit of background. I'm like a straight white cis male, so in my 50s. So I'm in theory part of a demographic that is probably more transphobic than average, to be fair. And I don't really understand it. So this idea of having a visceral revulsion, it seems kind of credible to me that some people are motivated by that. When you look, for example, about someone like Richard Dawkins, for example, who I think Katie Montgomery talked about very recently on her own show, her channel.
Yeah.
And this is a guy with a science background. He's not religiously motivated because, he's an atheist. I can't see him being someone who kind of views the Daily Wire on a regular basis or something like that. Although he will be obviously exposed to anti-trans propaganda from just the regular press and so forth, but yet his critique of, I guess, what he calls gender ideology or trans people seems to be completely without substance. There's little to it. I mean, even he's just saying, he's just basically saying, well, it's insanity, isn't it? Or it's borderline insanity, and you're either a man or a woman with zero substance. This is a guy whose views on many other things are so in depth, and then you look at that, you compare him even to someone like Matt Walsh. Even like Matt Walsh even has more substance to his argumentation.
Yeah.
Albeit that substance is entirely fallacious. There's still a lot more substance there. So what causes a guy like Richard Dawkins to be so anti-trans? And I can only think that it's this kind of visceral disgust or revulsion thing that people have been talking about. But
I think that that's in conjunction with propaganda. I don't think that that's separate because especially if you have somebody like Richard Dawkins, who he has a lot of like depth of knowledge of certain other areas of biology, but and you're right that the things that he's saying are little to no substance. However, he is spitting back straight propaganda. Like he's spitting back the same things we see on Twitter, the same things we hear from JKR, the same things we see everywhere else. And I think like that visceral reaction is a result of being taught propaganda. An example outside of this issue, like a lot of us that come from religious backgrounds of purity culture or any form of like Christianity, like an example for me, I particularly had a lot of baggage with how I felt about like concepts of witchcraft, paganism, like all of that stuff. I don't believe it's spiritual. Like I don't believe it actually does anything. But for the longest time, I had like the heebie-jeebies with things, even like films and books and things, because I was conditioned to believe it was evil. And even though I don't believe those things, I still had so much propaganda that I was taught that that visceral feeling has taken a while to go away. And so I think that that's what's happening here. I don't know if they're like, sure, there could be other contributing factors, but I think a lot of them go back to conditioning through propaganda.
I do want you to respond, Mark. I just quickly adding on to that. I mean, I'm mostly echoing a lot of the same sentiments, but I think, a lot of that visceral revulsion to queer people comes from growing up and seeing media where it's like, Ace Ventura and like, oh, she was a man the whole time and everyone pukes. And it's like, oh, that's how I'm supposed to feel about people like that. Like, I think a lot of the like sort of deep revulsion is rooted in fundamentally some sort of prejudice or propaganda about trans and queer people. So that's kind of how I view it. But yeah, I'd love to hear what you say to all that.
I actually watched Ace Ventura for the first time very, very recently, like in the last couple of years, and that scene was really uncomfortable, to be honest.
Yeah.
But no, I see what you're saying. So I mean, not necessarily the visceral revulsion kind of or whatever arises on its own, but it's kind of maybe driven subconsciously by propaganda in the first place. For myself, I have a really aversion, or I don't know, to I have anxiety about my own bodily integrity. Right, I don't have any piercings. I don't have any tattoos. I sometimes think it would be nice to get a tattoo, but the process is really quite I do have a revulsion for it. So if anyone you would think would have a visceral revulsion, and I do understand that obviously not all trans people modify their bodies in some way or have any surgical intervention. But if anyone who you'd think would have a visceral revulsion for that sort of thing, it would be me, because when it comes to my own sort of bodily integrity, even kind of relatively minor cuts to my own body, I find quite disturbing. So that's why I'm saying I really don't understand it. But it does make more sense if to me if there is, that subconscious propaganda is kind of driving that, or the propaganda is exposure to propaganda is subconsciously driving it.
Yeah, I think, and maybe part of the problem is like the use of the word propaganda in particular. Like I'm not attached to the word propaganda per se. Like to the extent that I'm referencing that, I think even like us trans people, Ben and I were subjected to all that and probably have some like deeply held beliefs that were sort of projected onto us as kids from this kind of thing. Like I think sometimes when we talk about propaganda in this way, people think you're basically saying like you were so stupid that you were fooled, and I definitely don't want to communicate that. Like I think this is a much deeper problem with like human psychology and our tendency to just like accept and integrate cultural things as if they were like biological and like universal, when it's often not the case. There are definitely biological universal facts that we can observe, but I don't think like trans people being disgusting to a lot of the public is one of them. I think that is very much a taught thing.
No, I get you, and I really sort of appreciate your thoughts on that, because that slightly changed the way that I'm thinking about this. That even people who are not maybe so obviously motivated by propaganda, the propaganda is still there, even if subconsciously in the background. Kind of, I mean, that does make a bit more sense of it to me. But yeah, just before I go though, there's just a couple of things I want to say. Is like, I really admire how you guys are kind of staying so positive at the moment with what's going on in America with Trump. I think if I was a trans person living in America right now, I would be having some quite severe anxiety about the future. So just that you can stay optimistic is, I think, is great. And like, it is kind of it should be an inspiration for everyone. I also want to say that when people say that trans rights are a fringe issue, that maybe only 0.5% or whatever the figure is of the population are trans, so it really doesn't matter. I think they are completely missing the point. They're completely off the mark there, because really trans rights currently are at the bleeding edge of the fight for everyone to have the right to be true to themselves and live as they see fit, right? So
Giving
for
you a
me,
snap applause
trans
over here,
people-
Mark. Sorry, go on. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Sorry?
I'm just affirming. I love that, and that is like a huge thing I'm so about. So thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Please continue.
Oh, no problem. And I think that in that sense, and it's a very literal sense, trans people are fighting for everyone, really, and not enough of everyone is fighting for trans people. So I would love to talk to you guys some other time and see, talk about what people like me who are not trans can do, what more we can do as well to sort of join in that fight as well. So
I appreciate
thank
it.
you very much for talking. Yep.
Yeah, thank you too, Mark. Have a lovely day. Thank you for calling in. I appreciate your time.
Okay, yeah, no bother. Okay, thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Oh, so many click buttons to get through here. There we go. Yeah, especially I really want to echo that last part from Mark, because the title today is something like trans rights equals bodily autonomy. And the sentiment that he was conveying is really what I kind of was trying to get in there, that I absolutely agree. The attack on trans rights is a Trojan horse. It is an attempt to smuggle in beliefs for people and a tolerance for laws and legislation that control who you are, how you express yourself, and what you can do in society, in ways that are like egregious, that we would all object to, ways that don't hurt anyone. Obviously, we control, what people do, what people say, and how they express themselves to a certain extent. But yeah, I absolutely think the anti-trans wave is a Trojan horse to get some more regressive views on like women and no-fault divorce kind of things through. I think that's going to be a big feature of this same fight going forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Who do we got next? Let's see. 5 is interesting. Damn. Sorry. There's a lot of advice calls today, so I'm trying to kind of like sort through what. Yeah. Does any of them pique your curiosity, Ben?
I mean, the last one's kind of interesting, although I'm not sure if it's quite on topic for our whole show. But
yeah. Yeah, I might
there's
say
one that was good that I didn't see that I think dropped.
Oh yeah, it was from Min. Min, if you're watching, do call back, because we've talked to Min before. And Min is that category of callers where I'm like, I know he doesn't really agree per se with a lot of trans rights stuff, but he's always respectful and has a good dialogue. So I appreciate that about him.
Yeah, call back in. But yeah, any of them that you're interested in.
Let's talk to William. They, them in Arkansas. William wants to know how they can help their cousin in a state like Arkansas. So William, you are live on Transatlantic with Arden and Ben. Tell us what's going on.
Well, hi. How are y'all doing today? Mostly.
Doing all right.
That's good. My cousin is a trans woman. She recently, as far as I know, came out and stuff. And, Arkansas is Arkansas and sucks major eggs. So I want to, with everything going on, I want to make sure she's safe. And like, do you have any advice for helping her? Does Ben have any advice as far as like maybe hormones and stuff and there and such that could help her? Because as far as I can tell, gender affirming care is pretty much banned here at this point for everybody. So I'm more scared for her than I am me at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the specific laws are in those states. I will say be careful about assuming that anything from the executive orders translates to like a law that is in effect, because executive orders can't be policy. They can tell you how to enforce policy, but yeah, there's maybe there's something in your specific state that you're referring to. I'm not sure.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders has, as far as I know, she's banned trans care for anyone who's under 18, but I'm pretty sure that it's like in Arkansas legislation that gender affirming care is banned outright. I will take a look. I can take a look more on that.
I'm going to guess, I could totally be wrong because I don't know the laws in your specific area. Most of the laws like this that have passed have been more, not so much that it's banned entirely, because that's really hard to justify in a court of law. They're usually going to be something like the state's like insurance program will not cover those, which effectively bans it for most trans people, because trans people have, much higher rates of poverty. And so they're going to be much more reliant on these sort of state programs. So it is like in effect a ban, but if you are privileged enough to afford private care, you can often kind of work around those things. So that's my guess. But I don't know your specific case. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, like most of the legislation like specifically targets minors because it's easier to give arguments about consent related to that. But yeah, what Arden's saying about adults, there are ways to kind of get around all the stuff for adults. But yeah, kind of echoing what Arden was saying with the executive orders, there's a lot of things that have paved the way for other things to come down the pipeline, but nothing is in effect from any of that. And so it's hard at this point to say specifically about advice in certain areas, except for the things that have already been passed in those areas, because we just don't know. We know what people want to happen. We know what they're requesting to happen, but we don't yet know what the policies are going to be in those areas, how those are going to be enforced, and those kind of details. And I don't want to give you misinformation that's not going to be helpful kind of as the stuff comes down the pipeline. But yeah, if you have anything specific that is already passed, then we could try to address that.
I just looked it up real quick, and I should have done this before the cause. Apparently, I don't know, in 2023, a federal judge kind of blocked the trans youth healthcare restrictions bills and all that stuff. So I don't know anymore. I might just be kind of panicking because, I'm just everything in general. Yeah.
It's all right. And it's a valid panic. We're honestly, what's happening right now is we're waiting on the Supreme Court to hand down their opinion from the case that they heard at the end of last year. That was basically deciding if states have the right to enforce bans like that. So it makes sense that it probably has an injunction on it. It's fair to be concerned. Absolutely. I mean, as far as what you can do, it's really hard to say. I mean, not panicking is a big thing. I think I do a good show here of, seeming calm and measured, but I'm also panicking with you guys. I'm in complete despair and despondency between these episodes. There's a lot of scary stuff that's coming that could happen. And I think really what we just need is to hold each other close and love each other. And remember that a big thing I've been seeing is, don't comply in advance. Don't necessarily run away from your home, run out of your state, detransition in advance. Hold your ground for as long as you can. And they might be able to take away our documents. They might be able to take away our medicine, but they're never going to be able to take away who we are fundamentally. So I think, resisting to the extent that you are able to reasonably and, legally, obviously, if you have a job or something that could be at risk, that is a consideration you have to make. But yeah, I really don't want to see people comply too far in advance, because that's kind of what they want, right? When they're passing all these executive orders and stuff,
they want you to roll over, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah. They know that almost there was a great graphic that showed how many bills were introduced in Texas in the last legislative session. And I think one of them passed through all of the hoops that it had to out of 300 something, right? So a lot of these are going to get squished and stopped at some level along the way. And I already know that the ACLU and the Human Rights Campaign and all these different organizations are ready to resist in the judicial system. And the judicial system is not going to be on our side, but go ahead, Ben.
but there are already lawsuits being dropped. Like things are already being filed, and a lot of the things, like for example, from Trump's last term, there's a lot of stuff that got held up in court for years, like for a couple of years. So yeah, so don't roll over yet, because like we might, like, sure, things could progress sooner, but it's also possible that there will be enough lawsuits and enough hoops that things aren't making it through, that things, even if they are passed, like might take a while to get there. So I agree with all that.
My other concern is, her being just a trans woman in a state like Arkansas, where, that's also even more of a scare to me. It's that the people here are very, right there in that Trump grasp often.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
and I think,
go ahead.
Well, I want to say too, I think it's great to want to be supportive. And I think it might be something that if you have a good relationship with this person, that you talk to them about what they need. Because on the other hand too, there's a point where maybe this person wants to be in that area. Maybe they want to fight in that area. Maybe like there's, I know one of my mentors is going to be a pediatric endocrinology fellow in Kentucky and wanted to go to Kentucky. And so sometimes trying to step in and save us from all these bad things, like sometimes we want that help, but sometimes we want to fight it ourselves. And so I think talk with your cousin and make sure that like you're not impacting any of their goals in their activism, and that they can kind of tell you what they're going to need throughout this.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks. I think I needed some advice and some calm down, if you know, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Totally get it. It is the environment that we are in right now is definitely fomenting a lot of fear and panic. And so I totally get where you're coming from. Yeah. Thank you for calling, though, William. We appreciate the conversation.
I've never wanted to own a gun before until now. So yeah.
Yeah. I am hesitant to endorse anything specific like that, but follow the laws and regulations in your area and take care of yourself.
Protection only.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to take the next caller, but thank you for calling, William, and best of luck. Let us know if, there's anything specific with regard to like the situation that you want to call back in the future. Thanks.
Will do. All right. Bye.
All right. So we are going to look at that poll real quick before we take our next callers. Remember, hit like and subscribe. I don't think I have merch tagged in the merch shelf, but I will later. All those little clicks and moving around really helps the algorithm, helps get our word out, helps get the message out so we can reach more people and hopefully help more people kind of understand where we're coming from and address these issues. But yeah, okay, quick reminder, the poll is, do you think teachers using their students' pronouns or using a different name could reasonably be considered practicing medicine without a license? So it looks like from our in-chat poll, 94% said no and 6% said yes. I kind of feel like those 6% are just trolls who just want to be like naysayers, because I have a hard time believing it's even more than 1% actually think that's reasonable.
No.
Yeah. So the recent Trump executive order was about basically trying to say that the federal AG will help with federal funding to state AGs if they go after teachers who their phrasing was sexually exploit children, which basically means tell kids that they can be trans, or practice medicine without a license, which is basically telling kids that they can be trans. And they gave examples for this, meaning social transition, using a different name or pronouns. Like, I didn't pull that out of my ass to frame this that way. These are like literal things that are actually in the full text of the actual executive order. So, I mean, I think this is the most patently ridiculous framing. And I think this is one of the many things that gives me hope about, they're trying this flood the zone approach where they're passing so many ridiculous executive orders. But I just don't see how any of these are going to reasonably hold up in a court. I don't know, Ben, what do you think?
I don't think they're going to hold up in court, and I don't think they're going to be enforceable. And that's something
Right.
else too. With our talk about executive orders, like, yeah, there's a lot of scary sounding things that, sure, they can make like policy from in a federal sense, but that are so incredibly unenforceable, like at a local level or at an individual level, that it's just we have to remember what is actually realistic and how reality works. But yeah, this is absolutely ridiculous. Like Ben isn't my full legal name, and it's not practicing medicine for anybody to use that name for me. Like any Nicholas that goes by Nick, like is that also practicing medicine without a license because their legal name isn't Nick? Like how far is this going to go? You can't enforce this, and you can't enforce it consistently. So
Yeah.
and no, this is not at all in the scope of medicine. Like
Right.
and thinking that social transition is even in the realm of medicine. Like, yes, when we say that it is therapeutic to affirm somebody, that not everything that is therapeutic is practicing medicine. Like,
Yeah.
taking a break from the internet is not practicing medicine. Like, going on a walk outside isn't practicing medicine. Like, there's a lot of things that we do that are good for you and that are helpful that are not practicing medicine. So this does not hold up.
Yeah. I think it's also like, I want to remind you guys that there's no teachers who are going to an individual student apropos of nothing and saying, hey, you could be transgender. That's not what's happening. These students might be talking about like age appropriate sex education, evidence-based sex education. And part of that might include, hey, sometimes boys like boys and sometimes girls like girls. And sometimes people who were born a boy might prefer to look like a girl. Like it's very child level, basic, this thing exists. Or it's like a school counselor who's had a student come up to them and say, I don't feel like a boy. I feel uncomfortable when I'm in the boys' locker room. And them saying, well, it could be a number of things. You could have anxiety. You could be trans. And here are some resources to help you figure out exactly what's going on to live your best life. Like, nobody is telling kids, you are trans, you should transition. That is like a fictional thing that's happening in someone's head. And
right, and they're doing the right thing by well, and just like on that, they're often doing the right thing by saying like, this child is having some distress socially. Let's refer them to a professional who can work with them on it. That's not them practicing. That's them sending the person to the proper avenue,
right,
to explore that.
Yeah, and the last thing I want to say on this before we take our next caller is I want people to know when we're talking about these things with your peers and loved ones, how are housing prices looking? I'm pretty sure gas prices were up nationally last time I checked. Egg prices are up nationally last time I checked. And I know we're sick of hearing this line, but I think it's worth repeating. This was a major point of their campaign. Kamala is focused on they, them. I'm focused on you. Trump has passed in his 10 days in office 3 separate, at least, executive orders focusing on trans people who are 1% of the population, who like 0.4 or 0.04% of the population is getting puberty blockers. Like, this is a vanishingly small percent of a vanishingly small percent of the population that Trump is wasting his time and political capital on, not helping you, not making your life easier. People who are on SNAP benefits, who are getting like Medicaid, have all had so many problems as a result of the funding freeze. And Trump isn't doing fucking jack shit to help you in that situation, but he is talking about trans people. That's not to say that he raised.
And he's already raised the prices of groceries.
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean, to the extent that, it's just all to say, like,
any power over.
Yes. It's just, I just want people to understand that, like, they are the exact inverse of everything they say. Every accusation they label is a confession about their beliefs. Like, they are focused on they, them. Kamala was focused on you. And now we're all paying the price because you all fucking believed his bullshit lie. Not you all. I know most of you guys don't vote for Trump, but the American people, generally speaking, these are the conversations I think you need to be having with your friends and family. Don't accost them, but be like, hey, what has Trump done for you so far that has helped make your life better measurably? Because he's been spending all this political capital attacking these groups. Is that actually what you wanted? I think these kind of conversations are going to be helpful going forward. But
yeah,
we've got callers to get to. So thank you guys so much for engaging on that poll. You can go to the community tab if you want to engage on it there. And you can comment and let your thoughts be known. All right. We have a bunch of calls on the line. Min called back. I would like to talk to Min.
yes.
So,
yes.
Min in California, pronouns he, him, or any, says, how do we protect trans men's feelings? What does feeling like a man entail? So, Min, you are live on Transatlantic with Arden and Ben. How you doing?
Hello, Arden. Good to hear from you again. I'm pretty good.
Good. Glad to hear it.
You, Ben.
What's going on?
Yeah, so normally I tend to like to discuss an issue with you and Katie because Katie is not here. And this problem, I feel like probably Ben can help me better because the situation, I mean, I'm not sure how to deal with it without, hurting the trans man's feelings. So that's why I need your advice.
Okay.
Yeah, what's your question?
Yeah, so for the context of my question, I am in a social group designed for any person who identify as a gay man to join. And so for the last 4 meetings, there was a trans man in the group, and he sit next close to me, and on day one, and then when we exchange conversation, I begin to have a feeling that he seemed to be interested in me. And the thing is, because I am not attracted to him, and by the fourth meeting, the meeting ended before the scheduled time. So we left a bit early, and then he asked me to go out for coffee, and I had to lie to him by saying, I had to pick up somebody in the airport, even though that's not true. And then he said, how about you rain check for next time? And I just want to leave. So I said, oh, okay, sure. But then when I see his reaction, he's very excited hearing that. I realized that I think I made a mistake by giving him the hope that something good going on. And I don't know, like if next time he really show interest in it, I wonder how should I say to him. What is your advice for me?
Yeah, I think it's the same way that you should handle it with any other person that is interested in you that you're not compatible with. You can just say, hey, I appreciate it. I'm not really interested. And like, you can say it respectfully and just say that I don't think we're really compatible. And you don't have to give a specific reason. But like, it's totally okay to not be attracted to a particular person. And they might be upset with that because they might need to process, maybe they got some hopes up. But I think most people would want you to be honest with them. And at least like don't be rude about it, but you can be honest and say, I don't think we're compatible, or I'm not interested in going on a date or whatever. And they should just be okay getting over it and finding somebody else. Others of you have thoughts?
Yeah, so Ben, I think this is the thing that usually when I was on before, when I used Match or eHarmony, when a trans man, not too many, there were just a few send me a like, I simply just swipe left because I have no interest. And if they send me a DM and I said, I'm not attracted to you, so sorry, you just find somebody who into you. Then usually it's ended there, but because it's a person.
Here's the rub.
I don't want to hurt his feelings.
Yeah. Here's the thing, though. Because now what you're doing No, Min.
Yeah.
So here's the problem. It's not the issue. The issue isn't that you weren't interested in a particular person, because that's how it should be. You should, think about, am I attracted to this person as an individual? But when you start making a generalization about everybody based on their trans status, that is where the problem is. It's like if you swiped a certain way on everybody from a certain ethnic group, or you swiped a certain way, like for a factor that somebody cannot necessarily change about themselves just because of that one trait, that can be a little less of a good thing in my opinion. And especially because we've talked about this with a lot of different people, but being trans doesn't mean you have certain sexual preferences. It does not mean you have certain anatomical features. It doesn't mean you have a certain like body type or anything. There are so many different trans people that if you base your preference on that one thing, your definition of what you are attracted to is not consistent. That's not a consistent measure. And so that's where it could be seen as harmful or hurtful if you said, I'm not interested in you because you're trans. That's a problem. And you shouldn't do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't usually like to bring it up. I guess it the worst case scenario is that this guy asked me, "Is it because I'm trans?" Or what do you think the tactful way to respond to him?
Well, if it's an individual thing, like that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact that you mentioned that you swipe left on anybody who's a trans guy, and like that's possibly more discriminatory. But I think like I think if it's an individual person that you just don't have chemistry with, you don't have to tell them it's because they're trans. You can tell them I'm just not interested. We don't have chemistry. Like you don't have to be mean about it in that way.
Yeah, I mean, like, you can't control what you like. If you're just like, I really have a strong preference for a certain set of genitals, but like Ben said, you don't know everyone's anatomy just based on their trans status. So I think it would be very weird to me to be like, oh, I don't want to be with you because you're trans, but you don't have to be with any individual for any individual reason. So I think it would be kind of just the same. Like, hey, sorry, I'm not interested. I don't know if you need to give any more than I'm not interested. Like,
yeah.
I don't know what reasons could be applicable there that they're entitled to that are worth providing, right? Like, I think there's risk of hurting someone's feelings unnecessarily, and I think it's easier to just be like, hey, I'm not interested. Like, and if they ask why, you can just be like, I'd really rather not get into it. I don't think that's your business, but I'm just not. Like, you can avoid the question in a way that's respectful, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Arden. Yeah, that's the thing that I tend to be have concern about, because when it comes to real human being, I'm not really harsh. Like I tend to be online with some people, but yeah. So I guess the next question I want to ask you, I guess this is for you too, Ben, that the feeling, like a man that, and I want to ask actually because in my own experience growing up, when I was around, I guess 8, 9 years old, I began to develop my like attraction for the boys at that age. I kind of cute and all. So when people ask me, like for example, like, and I was pretty gender non-conforming. So when people ask me, "Do you feel like a boy?" I would say no, because I like to do this and this stuff that stereotypically associated with girls. And when I grew up, and I'll grow that, the feeling that a feeling. Then when people ask me again, like, "Do you feel like a man?" I would say like, I don't know what I'm supposed to feel. I just know that I am a male, because I can produce sperm and so all. So I'm curious when trans men say that I
Mhm.
feel like a man, and what exactly they refer to? Because
It's
science, what do you know?
complex.
What they think?
Yeah, it's very complex because we have our societal norms of what is masculine and what is feminine, and those things do not make you whatever gender identity you are. Like, I mean, I don't know if there's a standard way to say I feel like a man. All I know is I feel like me, and I feel most like me when I have masculine characteristics. Like after I had top surgery, I felt more like me, or I feel more like me in certain clothing that enhances body parts that I want emphasized. Like I want to seem like I have broader shoulders, etc. And some of that is so that I can, you know, be recognized in society as a man. But a lot of it is just I feel comfortable in this way. And so for me in particular, I don't know if I have a strong sense of identity, particularly with the word man, but the word man is what is associated with the way that makes me feel like me. And so I can communicate to other people, these are the things that I like. This is how I like to present. This is how I feel most natural as myself. And that all together in our society is expressed as man. And so it's very complex to rope in someone's identity into one word or one label. But I think that's been the easiest way for me to communicate how I feel. But in the same sense, I can't say that somebody else might feel like they're a man, and they like completely opposite methods of expression. They might feel natural in totally different ways. I know plenty of people who identify as men that are very feminine, and want to accentuate other parts of their body that I don't want accentuated. And so I think it's a very complex experience, and I think it's more about communicating what is natural to yourself in a way that's understandable, as like rather than being a definition of what it means to feel like a man.
Man, if I could, I'd love to ask you a question for like a thought experiment to kind of help drive that point home. Do you
Yeah.
have like a favorite flavor of ice cream?
Yes.
Okay. What is it?
I like strawberry
Strawberry? Cool.
ice cream.
Yeah, why do you like
Yeah.
strawberry ice cream?
I don't know. I cannot explain it. It's just maybe the flavor, the fragrance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my point, right? You don't really know why you like strawberry ice cream. You just do. And it's not you claiming that like it is the best ice cream or that like it is the correct ice cream flavor to like. You're just saying, I don't know, but when I evaluate my internal sense of self while eating ice cream, this seems to be the one that gives me the most pleasure or whatever, right? Like it is a evaluation of a completely subjective thing. And that doesn't mean it's like, I have to doubt your favorite flavor of ice cream. Like, I'm not going to be like, but how do I know you really like strawberry ice cream? Because I don't have any evidence. What does it mean to like strawberry ice cream? Like, they're kind of like incoherent questions as far as I can tell. I think gender and gender identity is a lot like that, where it is the mere fact that you can't articulate exactly like what it means to feel like a man doesn't mean that you don't feel it, right? Like we're talking about a collection of, like Ben said, just to echo those points, like biological and sociological and psychological phenomena. There's like several different things interplaying that influences someone to feel a certain kind of way. And it's really hard to pin down, I think, in so many cases, and similar to like left or right-handedness. Like, why do you prefer to write with your right hand instead of your left? I don't know. It just feels better. It's easier. It doesn't feel as awkward. Like it's kind of an incoherent thing. Like there's no real reason why. It's just what is. Or there may be a reason why, but it's like completely unknowable to us.
Yeah. So I guess then, I guess like when you and Arden like feel like a man or woman respectively, then like when people treat you, like a man or woman, like is there some sort of social cue that they you expect them to treat you so that you feel like your identity is validated?
Well, that's
I
like
don't know
how I
if I'm
mentioned. There are
making or
certain
not.
things in each society that we associate with a certain gender, and so having some more of those qualities does make it easier for society to recognize you as whatever gender, because that's what we've stereotyped, what we've decided is masculine or feminine. And is that necessarily correct? Not necessarily. There's more than one way to be a man or a woman, or any number of genders. But um, like there are, in contrast to the things that make you feel naturally yourself, there might be things that don't make you feel that way or make you feel the opposite, and that's what we call dysphoria. And if someone calls me ma'am, I feel unnatural. It feels like not like who I should be called. It's a disconnect. And even cis people kind of get that feeling of a disconnect. So there isn't necessarily anything like definitive that says a man cannot like to be called ma'am. Like there's nothing inherently in the word ma'am that means it can't be associated with men or any gender, but the way our society has defined those terms um, causes some of that disconnect. So again, it's that very nuanced intersection of how we've defined gender, how we feel natural in our society, and the way that gender is performed, and all of that. If that makes any sense, I know it's kind of sticky.
Yeah, I asked you this question because I'm not sure, in the context of socialization, whether I admit that I treat, well, just talk about cis men here, heterosexual men and gay men a little bit differently. So with straight men, when I talk to them, it's a bit more like a pro talk, so to speak, and I tend to be more serious, and they tend to be a little bit wider personal distance, even if the person is friendly. With gay men, I tend to be a little bit more, flirtatious, even though there's nothing between us. And usually we don't the distance is a bit closer, and we're a bit more casual. So
Yeah.
I think I thought that's
Yeah,
why
and
I wonder like that's why I wonder
well,
like
that's cultural.
like
That's cultural, right?
yeah.
Like
So
queer culture
yeah,
has certain norms, and
For
cis hetero
masculinity.
culture has
Yeah.
different norms for masculinity, and so we have kind of unspoken social cues in each different environment that you kind of learn how to interact with that group of people. And so that's where the sociological side comes in, because even if you identify in a certain way, even if something is a different form of expression than you would normally want to do, a lot of times you will adopt certain expressions and certain norms to be perceived in a certain way in that particular subculture. So there is kind of a give and take, and you have to prioritize what is most important for you. Is it more important that they call me the right pronouns, or is it more important that I stand out as an individual, even if that might mean that they don't perceive me to be the right gender right away? And you have to play a little bit of that game. But what you're talking about is kind of this idea of adjusting for each different social environment that you're in. But I don't think your identity changes in either way. I think you're still the same person, just the way you interact is different. Is that an accurate representation, you think?
yes, yeah. Um, yeah, so this is the final point I asked you, and then I'll release the call. So then, do you think that if I in contact with a trans man, because in 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 my experience, because I have trans men at work as coworker, and we tend to be polite and we interact nicely together, but I have to admit that there is a little bit of distance between us, and and I always, talk to them, refer to their pronoun and respect their gender, but the connection is not really there. Like if I have with this man, I don't know why, but I wonder in a group, and do you think I should be a little more casual to them, make them feel like, they are like this man. Does it make sense to you?
I think just treat them like, depending on the social context. Like, I think and it depends on kind of your ability to read the room, but usually people will interact with you in a way that they kind of want to be interacted with. And if they're kind of adhering to more like cis hetero norms, then maybe that's the context they're familiar with, and maybe they're kind of wanting some more of that in return. Or if they're kind of using different societal norms, if they're kind of suggesting that they have more like queer subculture and that's how they want to be interacted with, I think people can give nonverbal communication in that of how they want to be interacted with. And if you can just interact with them the way that you'd interact with anybody else, and then you kind of adjust kind of as you read that interaction with them.
Okay, I see. Well, this is very enlightening call, so thank you so much for your help.
Arden, do you have any thoughts?
I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, just treat them like people, treat them how you would treat any other man, I mean, and none of that says that, because I know men, you are maybe not quite on the same values we are for this issue. It's not saying that you have to sincerely hold belief that someone is a man or a woman. Like, you can hold sincere beliefs that cis people, are not men or women. I don't care what you believe about their gender, but just treat us with dignity and respect. Like you said, you use their pronouns whether or not you necessarily like completely get it. You just want them to feel respected in your workplace. And I think that is kind of the best way to approach the interaction. So yeah, thank you for calling, man. We appreciate the conversation, and call back sometime. I like talking to you.
Yeah, thank you, Arden. Thank you, Ben.
Have a good day. All right. Okay, yeah. Reminder, we're going to read super chats at the end of the show. Any super chat of $5 or more, we will read out live. And if you include hashtag Team Arden or hashtag Team Ben, that will count as one vote towards our little scoreboard. And whoever has the least amount of votes is going to have to defend one of three very weird positions that you guys will get access to later. But we have full lines. I am closing the line, so no new callers are going to be in because we are chock full. And we have plenty to work through. So thank you to everyone who called in. And there were a few people in chat who I really wish would have called in. It was like Masego or something was talking about kind of like transgenderism, and people were giving them flack for that term. And it seems like they're kind of in a similar vein to Min, maybe. So I would love it if you called in next week or some other time. But okay, let's talk to Rogue Show, because he's been on the line the longest. Rogue Show, him in South Carolina wants to know how gametes work when it comes to transition or intersex people. So Rogue Show, you are live on the line with Arden and Ben. What's going on?
Hi. So, how you doing, first of all?
Doing all right. How about you?
Hanging in there and stuff.
Yep.
So, I'm working on a project on why the whole. I know this executive order comes up a lot, but the two sexes kind of thing. I'm working on a project on why that's fucking stupid. But I guess the obstacle that comes to mind is if a Republican argues that sex is determined by the gametes you have, or will only define sex as gametes. That is what was wondering how. I was wondering how does that work? How does gametes work with medical transition and intersex people? Because, yeah.
Well, the argument in general about the gametes is just completely incoherent because, while females develop gametes like in utero, like males do not. So, like, and I'm using those terms like just in terms of anatomy and physiology, but like sperm production doesn't happen until later on in development. So really, it means nothing for minors as far as assigned sex. But like, can you explain a little bit more like what you mean about gametes and like transition? Because gametes really
Like,
have
do they-
nothing to do with a transition process.
Like, do they like sort of change or do they like change or something? Like, are they?
No, and
Does your body
gametes. The
produce
thing is,
gametes? Or
no,
Sorry.
gametes do not change. Gametes are, and that's the thing though. The arguments want to use gametes because if you produce one type or another, unless you have an intersex condition where you can produce both, you're the ones that you are able to produce are not going to change. The problem is they're not taking into account people that don't produce gametes, and they're not taking into account people with the potential to produce both. So they're missing the nuance on that. But gametes, they're just if you are able to produce them, they're an inherent part of your biology. I'm sure in the future there may be potential to like revert them back to like a stem cell form and be able to change their trajectory. We don't currently have that technology to do that. And it means absolutely nothing for your transition course. Like how you transition has no impact on it. Might like reduce your gametes. It might make you have fewer of them, but people aren't transitioning to change their gametes. That's not something that's expected. That's like people, for the most part, trans people do not care about what their gametes are. And so it's an issue that the GCs have made a big part of their arguments, but the trans people have not used that as a core part of our argument. And we probably won't until such technology comes out that would allow that to change, if that's possible. So, I don't think that gametes are really even an important issue at all in terms of like trans rights. I think that GCs, if the GCs would stop talking about it, I think the trans community could pretty much stop talking about it too.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason it ever gets used in definitions is because it is the easiest to defend biological essentialist position. It still doesn't work. It's still, you can still break through it without much effort, but it takes slightly more effort than the chromosomes, right? Because the chromosomes, all you have to do is show them someone with Klinefelter's or Swyer syndrome, and it falls apart immediately. Like there takes like a couple more steps with the gametes conversation. So like that tends to be why they rely on that.
Yeah, and to be clear, like I wasn't like saying that trans people transition because they're gametes, obviously.
Yeah, and I didn't think you meant that.
I was just asking,
but I think it's more blown up of an issue.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Rojo.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just asking if they could like. I was asking if they happenstantially, if your body happenstantially reproduces the gamete of the sex you transition to, which you answered in spades, I guess. So my next question is like, how would you respond to people who use gametes, or the gamete argument for biological essentialism?
Yeah, it's one of the easier things to argue against because of like it's even one of the easiest ways to argue against a gender binary or a sex binary because you easily have the third category of does not produce gametes. And all you have to do is suggest that there are people that do not produce gametes, and there are plenty of them. And in fact, a lot of trans people do not produce gametes because they've had those organs removed. So if you no longer produce gametes, you're no longer in one of those two sex binaries options. And there are examples of people who have they have ovotestes, and some of them, like not all of them, have the ability to produce multiple gamete types, but some of them just inherently do. And so it's a pretty easy argument to say, you know, the gamete position doesn't work, because then you have to find some other way to define the sex of people who don't produce gametes. And so then they have to go to something else.
I also like to point out that they'll often do, like for Trump's executive order, it was something to the effect of females are people who belong to the sex class that produces the large gamete or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Which is also defining sex based on what they're presuming will happen in the future. Like it's at conception, what will happen in the future is how we define sex, which is nonsensical. It's like defining sex by this like it's kind of similar to when we were talking about, you know, the metaphor of being in the wrong body. Like there is like this ontological like ideal that exists in reality that like you will get to uninterrupted, but they don't know that. Like there's a number of things that can happen in utero, in along the developmental path, or even, you know, after being born. Like if you have some like tragic accident or something and like something happens to your genitals or whatever, that could result in you no longer producing those gametes. Do you cease to be female or male in those situations? Kind of obviously not. So those definitions start to fall apart. They kind of basically construct a definition that is like a sexed soul. But I also think it's important to point out that specifically what Trump has done is not just use the sexed soul definition, but they're also trying to establish in law this notion of fetal personhood, that like at the moment of conception, when the two haploids like meet, that is a person and an entity, even though it hasn't turned into anything yet, because it could theoretically, assuming everything goes right and nothing interrupts the process, that it could be a person. That is a person, which is silly. It's defining things based on what they have the potential to be in the future, which is not how we operate at all when we're interacting with people in society.
And like the kind of gross fact that they're thinking about like reproductive potential for not even yet a baby. Like I don't know, it's just weird. Why do you need to think about like small cells that way? Like
like it doesn't. But like it doesn't even. They haven't even like hormone washed and some shit. They haven't even. They haven't gone through the gamete process of gametes or whatever.
Yeah. So that I think those are the big things to focus on. The two things we gave you there. So that's what I tend to use. To be fair, you do kind of have to. It's hard when you are in the position of being right on the facts. You have to be careful not to come across in a way that is like condescending or I know it all, because that does shut people completely off to receiving the information. It's easy for us to do on the show because we're not necessarily talking to the caller. We're also talking to all the people viewing who aren't in that like reflective defensive mode. But I do think when you're having like one-on-one conversations, you probably have to kind of do like a street epistemology approach where you're like, well, exactly how confident are you that, you know, that the potential to produce large gametes in the future is a reasonable definition for female. Like, it's uncomfortable to people to not have any necessary and sufficient conditions for this category, but it's just unfortunately a fact that the category clearly exists and is clearly useful, but you can't draw rigid boundaries around it. They fail at every single turn.
Yeah, you're just asking that one question of, so what category are the people who don't produce gametes? And then watch them flounder a bit, because you're putting it in their court. They get to answer. If they have an answer, they get to feel smart about it. So they're more likely to engage. But that at least will give them food for thought if they're an honest interlocutor. If they're not honest, I mean, they'll probably just ignore that question. But if they engage with that question, that's pretty solid, and you can kind of go from there.
Yeah.
Well, if that helps you, Rogue Show, we're probably going to take our next call, but I want to give you a last thoughts, last word, so go for it.
Yeah, and one thing I'd like to say, like, it's also very fascinating that I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that there is a specific way that trans women can get pregnant and trans men can get other people pregnant. I want to point that out.
There's a possibility for the technology in the future to allow that. Currently, we don't have that ability, but
okay.
It's in the realm of possibility.
Yeah, I don't know. I might have been misinformed when I
mean, it's kind of like abiogenesis, where it's like we have a lot of the steps to get there, but practically as it applies to trans people, we don't necessarily have, like, my understanding is we have ways to like inject like DNA into sperm cells, and we have like successful uterine transplants in cis women. So like we theoretically have like the components, but it doesn't necessarily, we haven't seen it work in practice, or there's no evidence that would necessarily is happening currently, but could be in the future. So thanks, Rogue Show. I appreciate you calling.
I think we could I strongly think we could get there, but yeah.
Thanks for having me on, and yeah.
Have a good day. Bye-bye. Alrighty. There are quite a few people in the chat that I keep seeing getting muted, bringing up like, I mean, they're like trolling our stock accounts or whatever, but there's interesting topics there that I wish you guys would call in for the hour plus that the lines are open and able to receive calls. I would love to talk to you, because there's topics that like AGP and like numerous other things that I think would be interesting to talk to someone about. But you guys just like to sit in the chat and spam. So all right, we got to get through these callers. We've got KK and Idaho wondering how to survive in Idaho, and hopefully I'm not too disappointing for you, KK, but I don't know how much. It's going to be kind of reiterating some stuff we've said before already, but go on. I want to hear what your situation is.
Yeah, I was going to start out with saying I know you can't really say anything that you haven't already said, but,
sure.
Just with Idaho coming straight out the gate with their intention to ban gay marriage, and like the other day I went to get my estrogen through GoodRx, and it was like $400. The price had just jumped. And I don't know. I can see the writing on the wall, and it's really hard just to not picture the worst case scenario, And I know you don't know how to survive out here either, but like, damn, I might be screwed.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, I have so much empathy for your position. I'm really sorry you're going through that. It is so frustrating, and not to like freak you out, but I think it's good that the audience hears stories like this and knows that like it's probably going to continue to get worse from here, which is already really bad for us before it gets better. But I do kind of want to reiterate the notion of like, don't detransition ahead of time because they're making it expensive. Like, if medicine isn't accessible to you, then so be it. But don't let them take away like who you are or your expression. Like, I don't want us to give in to them. Like, basically what I'm saying is, until they drag me off to a camp and forcibly shave my head, I will not be detransitioning. And even then, if they force me to use he, him pronouns for myself for the length of that incarceration, I will comply to save my life. And as soon as I get out, I'm fucking going right back to who I am, because this is who I am. Like, they can do a lot to make our lives hell, but they can't take who we are away. And I'm sorry
Mhm.
you are a part of, you're getting caught up in the mess. It's truly awful. And they like to say that
Yeah.
transition will be a stain on American history, but I think the true stain on American history will be the absolute human rights atrocities that they committed on us. And I think the world is going to correct itself eventually, or will burn out,
Yeah, one or the other. And I'm right there with you. I would rather die than detransition, especially at this point. I got really lucky with my genetics. Anyway, I don't know. And I'm lucky I was able to go online through TRU Clinic and find some more better, cheaper estrogen that I can get through the mail, which is really awesome. But like, I can feel the government trying to detransition me. It's
yeah.
And like, I can't exactly leave Idaho. I've got like a mortgage and a home down here, but like, I will if I have to. But
That's
damn.
I think that's such a good point. I do want to give Ben a chance to jump in here. The only thing I want to say is that I think putting in on that whole, like, you'll move if you have to, but you don't want to. That is one of the biggest arguments against the states' rights bullshit. This notion that, oh, well, the lives of Texans are different than the lives of people in Massachusetts, and so they should have different laws. Sure, to a certain extent, but people who are born in Texas, who were raised in Texas, who have a community and family and a career, or they have it in Idaho, you shouldn't be forced to uproot your entire life and move away from the people you know and the community you are involved in because they are going to try to make your life intolerable. I mean, that is one of the reasons that the fact that we're having to consider things like that is one of the reasons that there is a very strong argument for what they're doing to trans people being considered like a genocide under the UN's definition. They're making life completely intolerable for us. And it's fucked up.
Passive. Yeah. I absolutely agree.
Ben, did you want to jump in on this at all? I mean, I realize it's a lot of personal advice, but yeah.
Yeah, this might not be super directed at you. This is just very general things for the whole audience. But really prioritize like real in-person relationships, especially if you're sounds like you're pretty connected to where you are. I'm sure you've got some people around you, but for people in general, it's a very hard time to be constantly online, constantly engaging with the media, and take care of yourself. We need all of us in the long run. We need us like this is a long fight. It's not a great idea to burn out because you didn't want to take a break for a day, a week, a few months. Like embrace the people around you. Like there's as much toxicity as there is like in the media. Keep in mind a lot of that is meant to be sensationalized and meant to like stir up emotion and stir up anxiety and hatred and all that. A lot of people in real life are less likely to act out on certain things like that, especially when they know you, when you're connected with them. So do some things in person with people. I hope that like people in our audience have some support groups or some access to other LGBTQ community, even if your only community is online and you can be in a less public forum, like being in a Discord group where it's a bit more moderated, being in other like knowingly safe spaces where you can kind of disconnect from a lot of the extra stuff that you don't need right now. Focusing on things that you like to do, even that aren't related to trans anything. Like take care of yourself, establish, what things that make you happy to be alive and be yourself and can get you through some of this. It's going to be long. It's going to be hard. And I think I've taken some time to disconnect a little bit, and it's been very healing for me and given me more energy to move forward. So even if it's not super applicable to you, I hope some people in the audience can take that a little bit.
And yeah, I've of course tried to keep as much community as I can, and there's not much around here. There's probably one gay bar in all of Eastern Idaho. But like, yeah, I'm trying to basically, I feel like all we can do is brace for impact at this point, but
Yeah.
I really appreciate you guys fighting the good fight, you know?
Well, thank you for calling in, KK. And you're being trans publicly right now is already an act of radical activism. So you are doing the fight just by existing and being you. So, take care, like Ben said, take care of yourself. And, you are helping us along the way, even if you aren't necessarily like on the front lines or anything. So thank you for calling in, and I wish you the best of luck.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Have a good day. Bye.
You too. Bye.
I think I heard a little whimper there at the end. Ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So frustrating. People don't understand how devastating this is going to be, and the anger and resentment that this is going to generate between trans people and their family and communities who refuse to see what's going on. I saw a great post that was talking about how few cis people have reached out to trans people in lieu of a lot of this stuff. My two best friends in the entire world immediately reached out. And a host of The Line did. I don't necessarily expect the host of The Line to, because we're in here debating this shit all the time. So I know you guys care. But yeah, like one of the hosts of The Line did, but not a single family member who was cis. My trans sibling reached out, but that was more of a commiseration. Not a single cis person was like, hey, I saw what's happening and I just wanted to let you know, like, I'm really sorry and I'm here for you. Like, none of that. And it's, they don't realize the damage that's going to happen. And the long-term effects of that are scary to think about.
Yeah, it's gonna be bad. But yeah, and I saying this again, like, take care of yourselves. Like, today's internet argument is not worth losing any of you in the long run.
Absolutely.
Like, do what you need to do to get through today. And if that means disconnecting, laying in bed, whatever the fuck you need to do, like, that matters. And that is
Hell yeah.
That is part of this fight. Self-preservation right now is part of this. So
Absolutely.
You're not doing less just because you're taking care of yourself. You're enabling yourself to do more in the future.
100%. All right, we're going to take the rest of these calls just in the order they've came in. So if you're listening to me and you're on the line, I'm going to read out the order you guys are in, just so if any of you feel like I've waited long enough, I'm going to drop, and that's within your right. We're going to start with Faye in Utah, then we're going to do Michael in Indiana, and then Mila in Colorado. So yeah, that's the order you guys came in. That's the order we're going to take you. So up first is Faye, they, them in Utah. Has a question about bodily autonomy, pregnancy, and the rights of parents. Not entirely sure that this is appropriate topic for this show, but I mean, we'll at least have the discussion. So Faye, you are live with Arden and Ben.
Talking about abortion.
Yeah, right. You are live, Faye.
Hey there. I had a couple of questions, and the last caller, KK, she kind of answered it for the most one of the questions for the most part.
Okay.
But I wanted to expand on that on her question a little bit, just real fast. As far as making things illegal for trans people to transition and whatnot, what is that looking like? Do you think we're going in that general direction?
We don't know. We don't know a lot right now.
It's really hard to know. I mean, my personal opinion, what I just suspect, purely conjecture here. We're also getting a little bit of background sound, like you've got music playing in the background. So if we could take care of that, that would be great. I'm actually going to mute you while I respond, just so, because it's so distracting. I just purely conjecture here. I suspect they're going to try to do something like that. I don't think they're going to be able to have any sort of enforcement of that, even if they manage to get something through. And I don't even think they're going to be able to get something through. I think they're going to get. They've already spent so much of their political capital, and unfortunately, we have some Democrats who are stupid and comply with the Republicans, like John Fetterman. Garbage. If you're in Pennsylvania, vote him out at your next opportunity. But even some Republicans are not completely aligned with their mission right now. So I think there's a good opportunity for us to be obstructionist if the Democrats can get their shit together, and if dumb motherfuckers like John Fetterman could take a very long leave of absence. That would be really great. But yeah, all right, you're unmuted now. See if you have any thoughts about that. Hello?
No, I just kind of wanted to get your opinion on that.
Okay.
But the topic that I called in about, little bit of backstory. My oldest child is 17 and got his 16-year-old girlfriend pregnant. That being said, he hid it from us for about 2 weeks or so before us finally finding out. And the mother of his girlfriend said that he was not allowed to tell anybody about his situation until all of her family knew about it, because it's her body, her choice. And I don't think that bodily
That's
autonomy,
not how-
her body, her choice, applies in this matter.
I feel like you do kind of have a right to decide when you tell people about something, but maybe I didn't hear correctly or didn't understand. Ben, what are you were about to say something
From
the
what I
opposite.
understood. Well, yeah, no, I think like it is up to, I think, the person who got pregnant has like the most say in this. But I think the issue is that the person who got pregnant, it was their parents. It was like their family that said that they get to know before anyone else does. Is that correct? Was it, who was the person determining who gets to tell
Yes.
who?
Yeah.
So it's not the person who is pregnant. So yeah, the parents of the person who is pregnant shouldn't get to make any decision in what that person gets to tell or not, because that's their medical information. I do think it is like, with that, I think the only person able to like have consent to disclose that information is that person who is pregnant. Except for with regard to medical personnel, that's a bit different depending on the person's age, and if in that state you get like emancipation, like with pregnancy and all that. But that's like a whole different thing. But that person shouldn't have to divulge their medical information to anybody for whatever reason.
Okay, Faye, before we continue this conversation, I have to have you address this background sound. It sounds like you're calling in on dial-up internet. What's going on?
I am so sorry. Give me just 1 second.
Okay. Are we driving?
Sir, I am busy. I need to.
He just wants you to type it.
So it's not actually the kids that's the problem. The kids aren't making enough noise for me to hear. There is a background. I'm sorry, Faye. We're going to have to drop the call. I can't tolerate it. It's useless for content, and it's making my brain explode. I am so sorry you waited all that time, and you're not going to get to talk, but I cannot do it. So my apologies. Yeah, somebody said headset stuck in a dishwasher. Like, Faye, if you're still listening, listen back. That is so accurate. It it wasn't like the fact that after I said there's a problem and then he went to your kid almost made me angry. Not because you did anything wrong, but because I'm like, no, that is so not the problem. Like a kid chattering isn't usually as big of a deal to me. I think kids are adorable. I love when they, with their little voice, are like, help me open this. That's cute. The fucking whale sound is what I couldn't tolerate. Okay.
Yeah, I think there's some feedback or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just can't do it. It's completely intolerable. Okay. Moving on, we've got Michael, he, him in Indiana, who says, how do I figure out if I'm trans? I love this conversation. Interesting topic. So, Michael, thanks for calling in. Set it up for us. Where are you coming from?
A lot of it's entangled in spirituality, religion, so I'm hoping to call back on Sunday as well, but I figured I should talk to people who are, first-person experience. But, how did you all figure out or know it about yourselves,
Yeah, I mean, for me, I feel like religion helped me understand, but not in the sense that I'm like, oh, there was like a spiritual understanding in myself. It was more like religion taught me that gay and trans people were icky and disgusting and sinful and deserving of hell. And for a period of my life, I was like, I don't think I'm any of those things, so I must not be trans or gay. But then as I got older, I was like, no, I just am those things. And that the religion just confused me about it all. It's really hard to, there was not like a moment where I was like, I'm a girl. It was a collection of things where it's like, when I was forced to hang out with my dad and his guy friends and their sons, I felt like I was in a foreign country. I did not I hated interacting with them in that context. I hated the vibes. They were not immaculate. It was also like when I would hang out with my friends who were girls, I would feel like, oh, at peace. Like this feels right. Like playing house with the Legos and at like my second grade classroom and like pretending to be a cat with my best friend Nicole when I was in like first grade. Those were things where I was like, that's where I kind of feel like myself when I'm with like women in my life. And I think eventually I came to find out that there were adults who were not the same gender that they were when they were born. And I was like, holy shit, that's me. That makes so much sense because I was starting to get into like pre-puberty when I was starting to figure myself out. And the notion of me growing into a version of my dad struck me with a deep existential terror, the likes of which I cannot convey. And and then when I was like, oh, I could have that path, that's the one that makes me feel right and that makes sense to me and that I feel at peace with. And that was kind of how it worked for me. But Ben, I don't know how you feel like yours.
Yeah. I had similar experiences as far as religion stuff went, but also similar but opposite experiences in like grade school, like early elementary, where all my friends were boys and like they didn't treat me any different than any of the other guys. And like I felt like in a foreign country with the girls. So, but like I've always been kind of androgynous because there is a lot of enforcement of gender expression in like primarily because I was raised to be the only girl in my family, and so my mom really wanted me to dress a certain way, and especially as I got older, like, hey, this is professional for girls to dress this way, and like
for me, it's
liked the way certain things looked. I liked the way certain things looked, but I did not like how they felt. And I would cry every single time because I would think something looked nice, but I liked it on other people. And then I would never wear the thing because it wasn't for me. And I had some experiences in like starting in middle school and going into high school, kind of breaking out of the enforced like gender roles that I was taught to have. Like I had assumed that if you were going to play a video game, you were going to play as the gender you were assigned because that's just how reality works, but it's not. And so I learned I could go on an MMORPG and you could be in the chat and nobody knows who you are. Nobody can verify
I also
how
did
you
this.
look, what your age. Yeah, and so I went in and I started making male characters, and I was like, I love this. And then I started going to chat into the chat with a different name, and like a whole different identity, and I was like, I love this. And then I would leave. I'm like, I hate it. And then I was like, can that just be real life? And it turns out, yeah, it could just be real life. Like I was authentically myself in those places where I didn't have to worry about the baggage. I could just unmask and be authentic. And then when I learned that, no, there are other people like that too, and all we've done is taken that authentic self and used it everywhere. And so, I mean, there are plenty of experiences in my life that kind of go along with that, but I think that's like the earliest point when I learned that I could change what I do about it. Like I can't change the way I was born. I can't change like what I was assigned. I can't change what society like conditioned me to be, but I can decide where I go from here and what I do with like the time that I have left. So yeah, I think Arden and I have very similar stories.
How's that relate to you, Michael?
I guess like I would want to know like how like this what gets beyond like queerness generally. What's more specific? Because like I feel good in makeup and wearing feminine clothing and things of that nature, and to a certain degree, I always have. I don't know how to pinpoint it though beyond the general. Oh, I definitely am queer in some regard.
Sure.
Like there's
it's okay
a feminine voice in my internal dialogue that is really like comforting, and I don't know how much I'm supposed to access that, or if that makes sense.
Yeah, you might need to play with it. You just might need to try stuff out, see what you're comfortable with. Because I think we've said this to many people on the show that like everybody has hesitation, or at least the majority of people have hesitation with identifying as trans, or even people who identify as gay, etc. It can take some time to really come to terms with, is this really me, or do I just think that it's me, or do I just want this to be me? And so like having the hesitation
that's more
like doesn't it doesn't assign you either way. That the beauty is you get to explore that for yourself, and no one else can tell you how much of it is true for you or not. And if that changes as you go on, then awesome, you learn something about yourself. And like humans are dynamic, all of it is. And so it's kind of intimidating to say, I'm going to try something on. And if you're talking to your friends and asking them to use a different name or pronouns, etc., it can be very intimidating, because you wonder, like, if I'm wrong, if I changed my mind, am I a failure in some way? Did I like it? And it's easy to have imposter syndrome with that, but like the people who matter in your life and who are going to be supportive of you are going to still be supportive of you. Like even if you're a she, her today and a he, him tomorrow, it shouldn't matter. All you did was learn a bit more about yourself. So it's hard to say. Like I know when you're going to other people for kind of advice of, or trying to compare your stories, it seems unhelpful from our side sometimes to be like, oh, you just got to explore for yourself. But I think maybe take it as freeing and hopefully not as daunting as it can be.
You don't have to land in a destination. Like I will often say, like I think Ben is completely right about just like evaluating if it's enough for you. If you love doing your makeup, just do that for a while. And if you feel like, I still don't really feel like I feel like I am more feminine than that, maybe you want to get like laser hair removal. You can start that, and it doesn't necessarily have to make you a trans woman or trans at all. You could just be like, there are men who might want to not have facial hair and to look really feminine. That's totally valid. I think it's for you to decide.
That is helpful, that part right there, because like
Yeah.
I have always enjoyed being able to play into the roles of both sides of the binary. Like I can grow a massive beard if I want, and then I can look super androgynous.
Totally.
And I like
Yeah.
to do that. So maybe that's speaking more to not to exactly being trans, but just the
Yeah, and you don't have to
gender
pick a
fluid.
side. Like you can embrace all
You'll
of
have
it
to
if
pardon me
if that's the most natural for you.
say wrong terminology at all, because like I am not hip to the lingo, as the kids
It's
would
totally
say.
okay. That's what the show is for. It's for you to be able to be where you're at with this topic. So don't worry about the lingo. I mean, if you say anything that's like particularly offensive, we'll let you know that it is offensive, but I'm not going to be taking offense, and I'm not doing it to shame you. It would just be so you know, just purely educational. Yeah, I think it is one of the big things that a lot of trans people feel is that I'm not trans enough. Maybe for me, this is just that I like makeup and want to have long hair and, want to hang out with the women at parties and want to be included with the women and everything. And then eventually those things start stacking up and you're like, shit, I am just a woman.
Actually, the long hair, it started for me when I saw the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie and saw Orlando Bloom. I was like, I need my hair to look like that.
Right? Totally. I think, removing like the notion of having to know where you land or pick a category, I think has been helpful for me and helpful for a lot of people watching the show to just know that like you don't have to have a destination. And I often think when you stop looking for the destination and just start kind of doing the things that feel right to you is when you find the destination. Like you kind of stumble upon it by just existing and living your life as authentically as you can. I don't think it's necessarily like, I have found in my head the collection of neurons that indicate that I'm a woman, so that's what I'm gonna do. Like, it's you could not possibly pick necessary and sufficient conditions for being a woman such that like you could boil it down to something so simple. It really is going to just be you doing what feels right for you and rolling with that kind of tide, what's making you feel good, what's making you feel like yourself.
And it's possible too, especially mentioning that you're maybe not as hip with the lingo, I guess. Well, like you can go to the internet and like look up some of the different labels, some of the different identities out there, even look at some neopronouns, look at some people sharing their stories. And it might be that some of these more common experiences just don't resonate with you as well. And maybe you see certain bits of it that click, but maybe somebody else who uses a different label would fit a bit better for you. And I think just exploring different perspectives might kind of point you in certain directions that may be better fit. And you don't have to stick with any of them 100% or even any number of percent. Like the whole point is just to identify what is most natural for you, and then how do I want to communicate that to others. But it might be a combination of experiences.
It's funny because the spirituality and religion is kind of where I find the most, like, I don't know if like comfort from, but going and researching and then finding out that the oldest statues of Aphrodite that we have, she has a penis. Like that's really affirming. That feels like, oh, we've always been here.
Absolutely. Gender diversity has been a part of the human experience. I mean, if you go watch, I think it wasn't last week, but the week before, I was on Chewed Gum with Erica Gutsick-Gibbon. She's a primatologist.
Love her.
Yes, and we talked about how even in primates,
creations, love her.
Yeah, even amongst a lot of primates, while obviously we can't talk to them to be like, hey, what is your gender identity? There are definitely lots of examples in these highly social groups that have sexually dimorphic social behaviors of individuals transgressing those norms. Like the transgression of expectations based on our sex and our biology goes back way, way deeper into our biological history than recorded human history. So I think it is Yeah,
Even in the recorded human history, it's like Jesus is wearing a women's kit in Revelation 1:13. Like, even the people that are most vehemently against it, it's in their book too.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it'd be interesting to have the conversation with you. We probably don't have time for it today, but about the spiritual element of gender for you. But, obviously everyone's different. And yeah, I'm not trying to like dictate how your journey goes. I just want you to be happy and healthy and feeling like good as yourself. So
I appreciate it. And likewise, I know it's interesting times. Do you know who's hosting Sunday? Because honestly, I just want them to kill my face.
I don't actually know. I don't think we have it. I think we'll have it sorted tomorrow. But we threw Jimmy for a whirl because he's been kind of relying on like Matt and Forrest, and I think both Matt and at least I know Matt for sure isn't available. I think Forrest might not be either. So I think Jimmy's like panicking, trying to put the schedule together. It'll be up probably tomorrow. So yeah.
Tell Jimmy not to worry. I'm going to call.
Cool. Right on. Yeah. Well, if there's anything else you want to add, Michael, I'd be happy to do it. And then we're going to take the next caller.
And for everybody listening, whether you're in Indiana or anywhere else, like hang in there. It's going to be rough for a little while, but then dawn is dark. It's darkest just before the dawn, as they say.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for calling. We really appreciate you. And,
Thank you.
Best of luck figuring things out.
Have a good night.
You too.
Yep, you as well.
I want to address the chatter really quickly. After we talked about, like, gender norms and not making that a label, being like, oh, maybe I want to grow my hair out. Maybe I want to get laser hair removal, and saying that does not have to indicate anything about the label or your destination. Mark in chat goes, saying having long hair makes you a woman is so regressive. I don't believe for a fucking millisecond that you actually give a shit about what is regressive and not regressive for women. So let's get real about that. But secondly, that isn't even remotely close to what I or Ben said. We specifically said that none of these individual factors are what make a man or a woman. I'm sorry that your brain is so addled and rotted by transphobia that you can't actually hear the words we're saying. But yeah, I don't believe for a second that you give a shit about what is and isn't regressive for women. All right. Sorry, rant over. We have one last caller. So sorry to make you wait this long, but Mila, she's here from Colorado, wants to talk about an opt-out policy for psychological evaluation prior to medical transition. So, Mila, you are live. Good to talk to you again. What's going on?
Hi, thanks for taking my call again. I can't believe I'm calling 3 weeks in a row, but
you're all right.
I guess I have a lot to say. But no, I appreciate you taking my call again in the first place. So obviously, like, let me just think of how I want to start this, right? Like, I think that some callers have asked, like, how did you know that you were trans and stuff, right? Which, when it comes to gatekeeping medically, like, that's kind of what the whole sticking point is, right? Like, how do we determine who's really trans, who's trans enough? Like, do you have a woman's brain? However we arbitrarily define those parameters as we arbitrarily define any other sex characteristics. I was wondering, though, before I go into that, would it be possible at all to give like a really quick, like less than 30-second response to the Gametes thing? Or would you rather I just focus on the topic I initially called to talk about?
Probably would rather you stay on the topic, but we're happy to talk to you again maybe another week about the Gametes thing.
Okay, cool. And I'm happy to do that, but I really think I've got there's a lot of biology, like, that's just, you don't know unless you get to a certain, like, technical point in med school. But so when it comes to, like, what I'm calling about, right, which is gatekeeping, you hear so often, right, like, oh, well, like, why can't you just be a tomboy? Why can't you just be a man who, like, is feminine or likes long hair or likes to wear makeup or whatever? And I think this, and I'm not speaking for everyone, of course, but this points to a very common misunderstanding in my experience with what gender identity, like neurological incongruence, however you want to refer to it, like could I like what I'm calling to ask about is basically like a policy model, right? Like,
Mhm.
and I kind of want to talk about how I relate to the policy model as well. And I don't just want to like kind of go on a rant. So like, where would you prefer for me to start?
You just go for it. We might jump in at a certain point. So we're not just doing like a complete like open mic and it's like actually a dialogue. But yeah, I'm happy to just go for it where you're comfortable.
Of course, and please kick in anytime you want. So my own relationship with my gender identity was never really feeling particularly feminine. Like I never felt particularly I actually am intersex myself, which is why I tend to be so invested in this conversation. And I am so in my experience, right? Like I would commonly be told the same thing. Well, like why don't you just identify as a feminine man? Why don't you just identify as a tomboy? And what's funny for me is I was born anatomically male, but I had de la Chapelle syndrome, meaning I was XX male. And when I didn't actually know that for a very long time, and you know, I had a very unique I don't think I'm technically de la Chapelle syndrome. I think it's in the broader category of XX male. But basically, like, what happened with me was that like I never really hit puberty, right? And like I was really, really thin and frail. I sounded like a woman. People would misgender me as woman all the time, even though I was grown and raised as a male. But you know, I've never talked about this publicly. I live completely stealth, so it's if I sound nervous, it's just because it's hard for me to talk about. But
you're all right.
For me, what made no, thank you. For me, what made me realize something was off was never about like, don't get me wrong, I love myself some makeup, I love myself some, you know, whatever, like, I can be feminine, but for me, it was always about how I related to people and how, like, my patterns of cognitions function. Like, I wouldn't say I consider myself a woman because I feel like a woman. I would say I consider myself a woman because I'm observed, my patterns of cognition are observed to function more similarly to female patterns of cognition, which are on a spectrum, but there's standard deviations there, right? Like there's averages. So like, I would experience that on a personal level. Like I never saw myself reflected in the way that men thought. And I was socialized with men. I was raised as a man. So little did I know I had ovaries like in my stomach because that's like why I never hit puberty right. And I went through so much like physical hormonal like torture, you know, because everyone just looked at my genitals and assumed this is the extent of the complexity of my biology, right? But you know, experientially, right, always related to women. The way that women process emotions, the way that women recall memories, right? Cognition refers to like how we like interpret like sensory input, like from our senses, how we like interpret it and like analyze, process the information, how we output behavior as a result of that, and like how we record memories. And whether we're talking about male and female patterns, you know, anxiety patterns, ADHD patterns, all of these different like mental, you know, complexities are ultimately like how is our patterns of cognition like specifically unique, right? And men and women do measurably like have different patterns of cognition, and this is really important when it comes to like medicine therapy. Like that's always kind of what I want to respond with when I hear other people talk about you know, well, why don't you just identify as a feminine man? Because it's like, well, I'm not even that feminine. It wasn't about being feminine. It was about the way my brain worked. It was about the fact that, like, if I'm in a female space, like, I relate to people. Like, I understand myself through the experiences other women talk about. When I hear men talking, like, and here's the weird thing, right? I connect to men the way women connect to men. Like, even though I was very masculine, I started rock climbing. I got very, like men and women were shocked to learn that I was gay because I was so convincing at pretending to be on the inside like a straight man, right?
Mhm.
And even when I wasn't feminine at all and I was completely masculine, people would say things to me like, wow, like you're worse than my girlfriend, haha. If I like told a story or I talked about my super masculine, right? Like watching football, crack open a cold one with the boys, but like, the way my mind worked more like a woman. And when it comes to policy, I think I have like a creative model for how to like, basically make everyone happy, I think, as far as like not gatekeeping anyone, like not saying it's mandatory to pass any psychological evaluation in order to access medical transition, but to put in a framework that says, all right, there are certain mandatory tests, but those mandatory tests are completely confidential. They don't determine your right to access healthcare. And most importantly, you have the option to opt out so that people that maybe don't get those direct results from whether it's brain scans, like, psychological evaluations, like, or like DNA sequential analysis, the results, you have the option to opt out. But if you have the option to opt out, no one who ends up detransitioning can turn around and like blame everyone that gave them access to the care that they literally asked for and consented to and say, oh, nobody warned me. Nobody like gave me these extra. So I wanted to ask like what your thoughts
I'm gonna push back a little bit.
model
I'm gonna push back a little bit because I know you're coming from a great place. I honestly, I'm in favor of an informed consent model, like for adults especially. I don't even think we need to have mandatory anything. I don't think a psychological evaluation needs to be mandatory. I don't think there needs to be anything other than informed consent. That said, I do think we need some of those things for minors.
Yeah.
But for adults, it should be more of an opt-in. I think you should have access to therapy and psychological testing. Like if you want those things, I think it should be flipped around to be an opt-in for those things instead of an opt-out.
And
but still getting the care.
Sorry. The reason I would also say that I think I agree with Ben and Mila, I think you'll agree with this because this is kind of echoing a sentiment you brought up last week, which is that I think it's a noble goal, and that might be a system I would be totally comfortable with. However, I don't think there's any modifications we could make to our system that will ever make people stop doing the transgenders took advantage of me and made me trans kind of thing. Like you could have the most ethical system with the most ethical guardrails and opt-out systems, and they will still find a way to spin it. Because that's what these people, that's their job, right? These people are getting flown around from state to state, testify in front of committees about how they were abused by the trans lobby or whatever. So I appreciate it. And that may be a good model. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, if it's an effort to appease the powers that be, I don't think that will ever happen. And I do think informed consent is probably a stronger model. I think what would be better is if there was some sort of oversight for the informed consent thing, because I think there's maybe some concern that people have that clinics are not properly walking patients through the fullness of like the informed consent.
Yeah.
And so maybe some sort of oversight committee that like could evaluate how well organizations are doing that might be warranted or something. But yeah,
even if there's like a class that you need to attend of like, here are the risks and benefits of this thing with like a credentialed instructor that can give the appropriate information or something like that. Like some way that they can verify that you were given the correct information could be warranted. But yeah.
If I may, like, because to me, I don't think I'm deviating from an informed consent model and that's the purpose of the opt-out, right? Because I totally understand there's real reasonable reasons to be concerned with like any gatekeeping criteria, right? It can be used by, if it's not confidential, right? Like, politicians.
I just don't get why the extra evaluation needs I just don't understand why the extra evaluation needs to be like mandatory, especially
I'd
like
be happy to
if
explain.
the well, but because
So
the other thing too
it's
is
non-mandatory.
it. Okay,
So
so then
and
what are
that's why
you?
I say
Why do you need to
there's
opt out then if it's not presumed that you're getting the extra testing?
so that's and right and that's why I'm saying opt out, because that makes it kind of non-mandatory. But it basically it means that everyone who the reason I say mandated is it's more like saying it's universally available, like any other form of healthcare. It's like everyone has the option to say, hey, and that goes into the distinction of opt in or opt out, right? Like what's really the big difference there, right? To me, the only difference there is it's not about appeasing the transphobic people. It's about like taking away the ammunition they have to blame the healthcare system, because then they can say, well, the healthcare system can say, well, here, look, here's where they signed and they consented to say, I'm opting out of this information, and that means I can't use it. I can't hold that against anyone.
Yeah.
The reason
I mean, I think
the
like
reason
that
I think
that makes sense as far as like protecting doctors from lawsuits, but I don't know that really solves like the broader problem of their motivation, right? Because I mean, they misrepresent what being trans is at every level. Like all these executive orders have laughable language to anyone who knows what being trans is.
No, agreed. And I wouldn't say that like, it's going to solve the problem entirely, right? Like for me, it's just another level of like protection for doctors from lawsuits, from the movement, from saying, hey, you guys like turn, you pathologize like personalities and like insist on it. For me, it's a form of defending ourselves against their framing. It's not a way of appeasing them or making their motivation go away. They're always going to look for some angle, right? Because the root is disgust. Like the cruelty is the point on their end. And the reason I and the reason I like the thought of like having those evaluations in place, like as an opt-in or opt-out model, is because I believe in universal health care. I feel like if you want to be informed when you're making informed consent, it's useful to have that data available to you.
But it's already in the guidelines to provide referrals for like psychotherapy and other things. Like those are already part of the guidelines.
Reproductive preservation.
And it's something that people should be talking about it. So I think the steps that we need for that are already there, but I think the problem we have, right? I think we're in agreement that people should be able to not get those things if they don't want it. But I guess our difference is where I don't think they necessarily need to be connected to the informed consent model. And maybe you think they need to be more connected, like they need to, by default, be connected.
I wouldn't say by default connected. I wouldn't even say it has to be part of the informed consent model, right? Like informed, because ultimately I don't think that the results should be, a qualifying factor, right? Like no medical test or evaluation should be like, okay, now you've qualified to, take hormones, access surgery, whatever. That should always be informed consent, right? Like, again, like minors, yeah, sure. But like for me, I think it's more about like, hey, if like everyone who wants access to those kind of evaluations should be able to have access to it. So in my head, like when I think of it, right, I'm thinking like, well, if it's mandatory, then like it's part of the healthcare system. It's easier to justify be covering like those evaluations being covered by insurers, like insurance providers.
See, what I worry though is if you have an opt-out model, is I could see insurances being less likely to cover it because you opted out. I could see them saying, because that's the criteria they're using now. They're saying we're not going to cover your surgery unless you get these 2 letters and this other stuff. I think they would still find a way to say,
that's valid.
Like you can opt out, but we're not going to cover it if you opt out.
And that's
so. I think the informed consent would be the best way to say, like you're getting this procedure, and like you understand the risks and benefits, and you're ready to go through with it. I think as long as we're able to demonstrate a medical indication, then insurance should be able to cover it. I think these extra steps might just make it more complicated and easier for them to deny coverage.
It might give them like an excuse to take advantage of that info to say, well, you're not really trans enough. And like I would say also on the flip side, right? Like if you say, well, I'm just going with informed consent, like then that can make it seem like it's elective or it's not medically necessary, which also gives them grounds to and not that, you know, I would maybe say whether you opt in or opt out, maybe that should be confidential, like by HIPAA, just like the results would be.
Well, I just think we don't need any of it. I think we just leave it in the hands of the patient and their provider and say they get to make that decision of whether or not this is indicated. Same thing with the other like auxiliary services, like is therapy indicated, yes or no? And I think that can be up to like the guidelines, like and the licensed practitioner and their patient. I don't think we need to make it any more like, I'm trying to find the right word. I don't want to say regulate. I want it to be regulated, but I don't want other organizations to get their nose into it any more than they already do. So
fair.
Yes, I think that all those services should be available, and they should be offered. But I don't think we need a standardized way of saying like this has like you're automatically included in this unless you say that you don't want to.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable position to be coming at it from. I think the fears are valid, and that's why I wanted to kind of hear your thoughts. Is I wanted to kind of hear what what you guys might think of that kind of policy proposal.
Yeah, I definitely think it's interesting, and I definitely appreciate the concern with trying to build a structure that is more resistant to the bullshit that trans people have to face and access to our care and the threats that we have in regards to access to our care. So I do appreciate that element of it. But yeah, I'm not convinced that it is, that there will ever be like it is. Yeah, definitely a good discussion, but we do got to move on and get to super chats. But thanks again for calling, Mila. I always appreciate hearing from you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Bye, guys.
Have a good day. Bye. Mila is great.
Yeah.
Honestly, I kind of hope she makes content or something, because geneticist who is intersex and trans, like, and a good public speaker, willing to and this isn't a slight at all. This is something that I look for in like guests and hosts, someone who's willing to kind of bulldoze to get their point across. Sometimes you have to do that in conversations like these. Sometimes it can be frustrating, but it is a good feature for a host to have. That's not an invitation, but I just wanted to say, I think you would be good at that kind of advocacy if that were something that she was interested in. So, okay, we have our super chats to get to, and let me close down the lines here real quick. Any super chat of $5 or more, we will read out live on air starting right about now. Also, remember to hit like and subscribe. It's free and it helps the channel massively, in some ways more than donations. So click the buttons, do all the things. Your options for our loser position are that bananas should be eaten like corn on the cob, that all movies should be musicals, and that all food is better canned. So that poll is going up in chat. Give us your thoughts, and then Ben, you ready to hit some supers?
I'm ready.
All right. You start.
And I can read now, so that's excellent.
Oh, right. Yeah, okay, good.
No, I'm all good. I'm all good. Yeah, it's wearing off now. $5 from Ashley Bador. I cannot speak. Are there any recommendations on how long to give HRT to work on breast growth before considering breast augmentation? It's kind of individualized. I think it's generally smart to wait at least a year or so, give it some time to work, because of course whatever they do surgically is going to be less modifiable and possibly less ideal if you're like things kind of haven't settled yet. But there aren't any like official recommendations that you have to wait a certain amount of time. That's kind of you and your body. But something that if you're curious, you can get a consult with a surgeon and they can tell you what that would look like in your case.
In my experience, surgeons have individual requirements. Like, I feel like I had one surgeon who was like, I won't do it unless you've been on hormones for a year. And I had one that said you wouldn't do it if you've been on hormones for 2 years. So it seems like it's kind of surgeon by surgeon.
Yeah. Probably depends on the technique they're using too and what their results have been.
And thank you to Haley Geringer in the chat for the scoreboard reminder, because my dumbass would have just let that go. Yes. All right. Then bam. All right. Let's see. We've got $5 from Heathen Granny. Pentagram Leaf. I'm wondering if you TM Pentagram Leaf, excuse me. I'm wondering if you have any advice you can give to me on facial and body hair, because it causes me lots of dysphoria. Do you have any tips? I mean, outside of like laser hair removal or electrolysis, not really. I will say you can get a smoother like shave, for example, by if you put like a hot towel on your face and then with like a fresh razor shave and then let your like cool down your face. That will help you get a really, really close shave. That'll feel smooth for longer. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Some laser hair removal companies will do like a, what do you call it? Like a payment plan. But, you know, I just finished paying off one of those. It was $170 a month for like 3 years. So, you know, be careful what you get yourself into. It wasn't a crippling bill, but it was annoying, and I'm glad it's gone.
$4.99 from Jason. What you got in the enclosure, Arden? Snake or lizard?
Nothing yet. This is going to be for my 2 emerald tree skinks. They're going from that little enclosure to this massive mansion. It is planted. It has insects in it. It's going to be fully bioactive. So yeah, that's where they're going to go. I'm letting the plants like recover from transplant shock right now. So. Oh, sorry. $4.99 from Louise Richardson. Dr. Ben, what do your peers think about politicians dictating medical policy?
Pretty much all the doctors I know think it's garbage that they're trying to make decisions without any knowledge.
Valid.
20 pounds from Jackie Greenland. This weekend, I'm teaching tango to a church group at the request of a vicar wanting LGBTQ plus outreach. And apparently, there's a GC in the group. Will be fun when they realize the teacher is a trans atheist. # Team Arden. That'll be
nice.
That'll be fun.
I also realized I had groceries that are supposed to be delivered at 4:30, but I don't think it was like between 4:30 and 5:30. So I don't think we have to rush yet, but.
If you need to step away, we can we'll speed through.
We'll see what we need to do. Hopefully we can just get through these. €5 from Hedge95. In my country, there's a mandatory military service for men. Should trans men be obligated, forced to serve, and trans women be exempted from serving? I mean, I guess if that's the way your country does things, I hate forced conscription in general.
Yeah, it just shouldn't be a thing.
Yep.
€5 for Mismatched. We're not even 2 weeks in and already have concentration camps. I really don't understand people's optimism. It's going to get so ugly so fast. Yeah, I can't say a whole lot about a lot of things. But try not to constantly be surrounded by like what's going on in the media. There's a lot of stuff that people are saying that is not entirely correct. There's a lot of things that are correct. There's also a lot of things that aren't. And there's a lot of stuff that we don't know. So
Yeah.
I get that it's hard to understand optimism. It's not even necessarily optimism that things are okay. It's an optimism that you need to have kind of within yourself to be able to fight harder. If you believe that you're going to lose, it is a lot harder to win. And so there's certain things you need to hold on to. Everyone needs something positive to hold on to, whether it's a big thing or a small thing. So I know it's hard for everybody, but try to hold on to at least something right now.
Yeah. For me, it's not optimism. It's just avoiding despair, I think, is more of what I'm in. Wouldn't say I'm optimistic at all. 5 pounds from Mystic Minds. Oops, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, like, it's trying to make less misery out of a terrible situation.
Yeah.
Not necessarily optimism.
5 from Mystic Minds and Alice Tavern. Don't forget, folks, the state is corrupt and will never have our interest in mind. Get organized, resist, revolt. Community action is survival. I mean, I understand the sentiment to revolt is strong right now, and I don't necessarily think it's unwarranted. I can't personally advise people to revolt because I think there's so many things that could entail from that I don't necessarily endorse, and many of which I do, but many of which I don't. Organize and resist, though. Be with your community action. Love all those things. So thank you.
Yes. $5 from Crystal B. As an introvert-leaning individual, if you can, in a safe way, practice pushing back in general, especially in the face of these atrocious executive orders. Yeah, like, don't be quiet. Like, you can, like, use the rights that we still have. Speak out. Confront misinformation. Those are all great things that you can do right now.
Yep. $10 from Che S. Thank you for doing what you do. Thank you, Che, for supporting what we do. It makes it worth it.
$5 from Maud. Via Aaron Reed's Informed Consent Map, Arkansas has informed consent clinics in the Little Rock and Cherokee Nation northwest corner areas.
Nice.
I don't know how easily accessible those are to the general public, but it's great that there are some options there for people.
Yeah. $10 from Plastic Roses. Thank you all so much for the show. I'm helping my trans family by giving them a home in my blue state. I know we are tired, but as helping each other is the best thing we can do. Yeah, that is a great way to be like an ally as a cis person, to be like, hey, let me be like a refuge for you, while you are moving or figuring things out. I realize it's a lot to open your home to someone, but it could save someone's life.
$5 from Melatonin Ale. Student X is out sick. Whoops, sorry. I practice medicine with no license. #Team Arden. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's really silly, the notion of names somehow being like, it's one of those things that you could boil down into absurdity so easily, where I'm like, there's no way this is enforceable in any meaningful way.
Like, that's practicing medicine without a license, but, actually making policy about medicine that you don't understand is somehow not practicing medicine without a license. Like, excuse me.
That I hadn't even thought about it in that context. Yeah. That's so funny.
Yeah, it's wild.
$5 from Heathen Granny. Oh, sorry.
Was it me?
I think it's me. I think this attack on women and minorities is a strategy to divide us. While you're busy attacking us LGBTQ people, they're robbing you blind. Oh, absolutely. It's 100% a bait and switch. And so many Democrats are falling for it, while Chuck Schumer is sleepily talking about how people are aroused at fucking meetings. Like, the Democrats are a joke. I'm disgusted, and man, nothing's gonna radicalize me like how they're responding to everything here.
Yeah, $5 from Tubi and 323. Mag finding out reminds me of 9 Inch Nails lyrics. Bow down before the one you serve. You're going to get what you deserve. We'll see. We'll see how much they learn.
Yeah. $10 from Aliashana Silverbow. As a 5-year-old boy, I painted my nails with marker and got in trouble. I'm 43-year-old now and painted my nails with nail polish for the first time, and it felt great. First time since, and it felt great. Hashtag you thought it was going to be a joke. Hashtag Team Arden. I appreciate some sincerity from you, Aliashana.
Yeah.
I also got in trouble for painting my nails as a kid. I didn't even do it. My cousin did it to me, and I got in trouble.
Yikes. $5 from Aliashana Silverbow. Here we go for the joke. Why didn't Peter Pan's career in stand-up take off? Because his jokes never land. Hashtag inspired by someone in chat. Hashtag chat isn't for debates. Hashtag Team Arden.
That's pretty good.
Thank you so much.
$10 from Cassie Wolf. Dr. Ben, I'm Faye that called in. My question is, where might the line be dividing the mother's bodily autonomy from the father's rights given the parents choose to keep the child?
Yeah, with regard to bodily autonomy, it is the medical information of the person who is pregnant. That is their medical information. Even if you are the partner that got that person pregnant, you still are not in control of the pregnancy or that medical information. That is like their medical information. So
yeah, that's
where I stand on that.
Real basic bodily autonomy. This one too.
Oh, me. $10 from Cassie Wolf. Faye again. It was just perfect timing that my 4-year-old was asking for something when you were asking me to address the audio. The web caller is always giving me issues. Hashtag Arden.
Damn, I'm getting all the points.
I know.
Yeah, the web caller sucks. It was such a weird problem, but 999 from JW Edgy. Missed live show 2 hours behind. Have fun, I'll catch up. Transphobes can't use a trans person's new name, but can call Gulf of America. Make up your mind. For real, though. It's unbelievable. They'll rename the entire Gulf of Mexico before they deign to call a trans person she, her.
$4.99 from JW Edgy. Hope people are queuing up the poop joke super chat section of the show is almost as much of a shit show as American politics.
Right on.
Sure. Yeah. Poop jokes.
Love poop jokes. $10 from Beazle. Why are gendered soul believing theists so incredulous about trans issues? It makes sense that God, who invented pediatric cancer, might also put people in the wrong body as a prank. Hashtag Team Ben. I mean, yeah, that's so complex. Yeah. There's so many reasons that, I can't even get into it. That's like a whole call. You should call in with that, talking about
for sure.
Yep.
$10 from Jax Takabi. Hashtag transmask. Hashtag Team Ben. Getting closer. This is always like usually one person gets more votes in the beginning and then it evens out and then we never know. It's always a nail biter in here.
And then we have $10 from Min. Thanks to Arden and Ben, I will do my best to make the trans guy feel the least hurt. I used to be rejected due to my race. I made no fuss about it. I understand I cannot expect everyone to be like me. Well, I don't think it's rejection in and of itself that's the problem. It's like, that's why I mean, like, just say like you're not attracted to them. Like that doesn't entail any like sense of like, oh, I'm being discriminated against because of my gender, and still communicates the exact same thing. And maybe I would argue that you should have made a fuss about it, because like saying I don't date Asian people is also just fucking racist. Like, you still don't have to date Asian people if you're racist, but it doesn't make it not racist to feel that way. That's kind of our point. You're allowed to not date trans people, but it doesn't make it not transphobic.
$10 from Haley Geringer. I was out of money last week, so here's $5 for today and $5 for last week. Pretty rough couple weeks for us all. Hashtag Team Dr. Ben. Well, thank you so much for the contribution.
Yeah, thank you, Haley. So $10 from Jamnico6. A grocery store customer checks out with prune juice, a toilet paper, laxatives, and wet wipes. The cashier asks, "What are you doing later?" The customer said, "Snuggling with my cat." Were you expecting a poop joke? I mean, there's almost like a prepping for anal sex joke there.
Yeah.
Let me clear out my system. Damn, you're going hard. Prune juice, huh?
$5 from Monkey a typewriter. I bet fiscal cost of dealing with obstacles to transition. That's got to be more than the cost of transition, but fiscal conservatism or whatever. Yep.
I mean, that is the entirety of the conservative movement, is being like, we're going to object to this because it costs a lot of money. And to object to it, we're going to set up very expensive measures in the process. I mean, tale as old as time. Another $5 from Monkey a typewriter.
Logical?
Right. Another $5 from Monkey a typewriter. I missed the time before the death of satire when it was possible to make things more ridiculous. Hashtag team anal retentive, renal retentive, hashtag Ben thought we forgot.
Yeah, that was a whole hashtag for a while in the super chats.
I get it though. I know Matt has like objections to like The Onion, because at the world we live in, it is, to be fair, sometimes really hard to tell what is satire and what is absolutely serious. I also wish we could do satire because I think it's so funny, but it's hard to decipher nowadays.
$50 from Haley H. Trying to make myself feel better by giving money to those actively educating for a better future. We will push through this nonsense. Heart.
Thank you, Haley.
Thank you so much. And yes, we will push through. It's gonna suck, but we've done similar things before, and we will get through it.
Absolutely. $5 from Mr. Boricua 10. Hashtag Team Dr. Ben is right about disconnecting for a bit. It's helped big time. Have a thing to do to keep from burning out. Burnout sucks ass. Not worth it. Yeah, I mean, you can't fight if you can't fight. So, absolutely.
Take care of yourself.
I also think, inversely, to a certain extent, if you are feeling up to it, we need voices now more than ever. If you feel like you have the capacity, and I want you to understand that being on social media this way is a bigger burden mentally than it seems to be. It takes a long time to kind of learn how to cope with the experience, but we need voices now more than ever. So if you aren't feeling burnt out and you're feeling like you want to fight, we need more voices. Like we're at a massive deficit on the left compared to the right-wing media ecosystem. So
$5 from Blind Limey. I'm with Carlin. Given the state of the world, I believe we should all bow our heads and observe a moment of screaming. Yeah, I think I've done that a few times.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
$10 from a Dragon Ate Me. I hate how supportive my family is to my face when they voted how they did. They act like they had no idea this would happen. It makes me feel guilty for feeling unsafe around them. I'm so torn. Hashtag Team Ben. Definitely don't feel guilty. I've had a visceral anger, unlike anything I've ever felt towards my family who voted for Trump. Like, I don't know if I could be around them because I'm not a violent person, but the wrong conversation, I think, could push me over the edge in this environment. So I'm just, don't feel bad about it at all. They're fucking bad people for doing this.
Thank you for the vote.
Sure. There we go.
$4.99 from Jason, helping Arden with her host recruitment efforts. Hashtag Team Mila. Team Mila, that could be for you.
I think Mila's great, and honestly, I think she could probably do the job well. We don't really platform people who don't already have a platform, which is part of why I was saying, like, I hope Mila would consider doing some sort of advocacy herself, because I think she's good at it. And if she was doing that, I think we could make a better case for that kind of thing. But I also don't want people just calling in thinking that they're auditioning for the show, because that's not really what it's for, you know? I'm not going to be your pathway to success. So, go out, do the thing, get good at it. And if we notice you and appreciate your work, of course, we're going to take an interest. So Is this one me?
This one's you.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I talked the whole last one like a dumbass.
You're good.
50 Nox from Arsenic 1987. Didn't catch the show, but sometimes you just have to go hashtag Team Ben. Arden Rusher says it. Sorry, world. We know he's an idiot. Love from Norway.
That's great. 20 euros from Lazy Dragon. In Austria, we don't have informed consent. You need to get 3 different psychological evaluations before you can even think about starting medical transition. And we still have detrans people spreading their propaganda. Hashtag team. I don't know who Den is. Hashtag Team Den.
I'm going to assume that's you.
I assume it's me, but it's funny. I would. But yeah, it sucks that you have to go through all of that. I think those barriers should be out of the way for adults. It's your own body. Do you want?
Yeah. And again, like, the Castle Review commissioned a retrospective analysis of access to puberty blockers in the British Medical Journal that was released just a few days ago. You know what they found? Between 2011 and 2021, it was like less than 200 people, which seems insane. But it's like, yeah, you can have the most stringent barriers, the most limited access, the most thorough diagnostic process, and they're going to bulldoze through. Exactly. It's like, there's no system that's going to stop that. It's unbelievable. We have $5 from Militone Ale. What's a good source for data on gender affirming care for minors? I'm so fucking tired of they're transing the children misinformation. Hashtag Team Steckmom. I mean, there's no single good source. This is part of the problem, and why I was talking last week about like how to understand how to evaluate the quality of an academic study. But I mean, there are good. Calasia in the chat has often dropped the link to Vice Rhino's trans research, like repository of research. That is a good source. Musicotic on Reddit, a comprehensive defense of trans people. Type in Musicotic, a comprehensive defense of trans people. You will find the thread. Very thorough with lots of different studies. They also reference like not just the findings of a study, but they'll be like, oh, this is a common talking point. Here are the data that are relevant to that talking point. I don't know, Ben, do you have any recommendations on this vein?
Other than, I'm trying to think of things that are not behind a paywall or anything.
Yeah.
But generally anything put out by like legitimate medical organizations, primarily the various national boards of endocrinology, are great ones to go to. Those are kind of my biggest recommendations. But and even like child and adolescent psychiatry, they have some good information. Those are probably the best ones.
Absolutely.
This one's me. $5 from Unstillborn.
I'm ready.
Yeah, so you're gonna sing it. You're gonna sing it, right?
Oh, I thought you were gonna sing it.
No, I'm not singing it. I'm not singing.
You're not singing it?
I'm not singing it. No, I will. I will say it.
Listen, I don't do public singing anymore. I had my day doing that for a living. Not for a living. I did gigs at restaurants as a teenager. HOTTOGO, snap and clap and touch your toes. Raise your hands, no body roll. Dance it out, you're hot to go. It is
hashtag Team Arden.
Since Trump has royally fucked in ungayed YMCA, that's out. That's out. As a queer anthem, in the trash, nobody cares about it. It's for gross, salty old men who nobody likes now. Chapel Roan, Queen of Queer. I worship at her altar. This is the new YMCA, new queer anthem. Thank you.
I can read the next one because you sang this one, kind of, or you read it.
Okay.
Oh, I guess it's this is my cousin. $5 from Francis Nolte. That's my cousin. Art. Thank you so much.
Oh,
see you
that's really
here.
nice. You also got another
Also,
one.
$5. Another one. I forgot hashtag Team Ben. Thank you so much, cousin.
Oh, that's really cool. $5
Oh.
from Birdie B. Hashtag Team Arden.
That's my roommate doing for Team Arden.
Oh shit. Thank you. I definitely deserve it over Ben. I'm glad you recognized.
Yeah, sure.
Just sick living with him to know that. There you go.
I guess it's because my cat is a bitch to their cat. And so that's fair.
That's fair.
$20 from Velociraptor 1182. Love y'all on the line and in the chat. Curious what y'all's thoughts are on how neurodivergence impacts dysphoria/transition and vice versa. Hashtag I'm no longer an atheist because Chapel Roan is God. Hashtag Team Arden. If anybody was going to be God, I would approve of this. But I think we've had calls on neurodivergence and dysphoria and transition. This is definitely more of a call topic, I think.
Yeah, very, very deep and thorough. We appreciate your donation, so not to shuffle it away, but yeah, I think it's way too big to get into via text like this. We got $10 from a Dragon 8B. Context: my stepmom went mama bear at someone being bigoted toward me one day. I'm 34, but you're never too old for mom hugs. Oh. And then the next day I was excited about some of Trump's economic executive orders. Yeah, that's hard. I mean, they don't realize too that, these executive orders are in service of Trump's billionaire friends. This is cronyism at its finest. I mean, this is oligarchy and cronyism. They are doing nothing but lining their own pockets. They don't give a fuck about the working American.
My cat's yelling at me from outside the door. $10 from SJL. I'd be thrilled to volunteer as a replacement host. Also, the first person to say it would be a bad idea. I think I'm too boring to even call in. Hashtag Team Arden.
Thank you, SJL. And despite that last minute vote, it is official. I have in fact lost any new votes. Unfortunately, did not make it in time. So what position do I have to defend? Let me see. What is that? Oh, bananas are eaten like corn on the cob. Man, that was the one I cared about the least. The one I thought about the least in between. All right, hold on. Let me get the stage prepped. Yeah. You go let your cat in while I get this prepped up for the audience. So bananas should be eaten like corn on the cob. And host right is the winner, while host left is the big fucking loser. All right. I am starting it up. All right, in 3, 2, 1, go. So I'm also realizing the title isn't fitting entirely in the box, but it's too late for that. So bananas should be eaten like corn on the cob. I mean, it's just a fact that, if as far back as some of our chimp ancestors, we have always eaten banana wrong. We have peeled the peel off to get to this fleshy center. But let's acknowledge the truth. We should be eating banana like corn on the cob. And no, I don't mean pulling out the banana and eating it like a typewriter. I mean, you got to chew away that whole goddamn peel before you get to the juicy center. And I realize you don't eat the juicy center of a corn on the cob, but that doesn't matter. It's like the corn on the cob. It's not identical to corn on the cob, And plus, usually these sorts of things have loads of fiber and nutrients. And while I don't actually have proof, I'm sure it just happens to be the case for bananas, because being overly confident in something is like my job. Yeah, I mean, bananas are good. They're full of potassium. They help your muscles repair. So, if you want to be like a fitness bro We want to get all swole. You know, we need some warriors coming up in the revolution. You got to be eating your bananas, peel and all. Don't be a little bitch. Eat the whole fucking thing. There's no excuses anymore, right? We got to get on this health plan and just chomp that thing to fucking bits. I mean, we all need a little bit, you know, and I'm sure most of us are coffee drinkers. We have some probably dysregulated gastrointestinal systems. I think some fiber is probably warranted in our diets. So, you know, eat, you know, I mean, at this point, also just eat the tree. Eat the whole tree, the leaves, the bark, eat the whole thing. Why stop at the peel, honestly? That was my argument. Thank you guys so much for being here with me.
I'm convinced. I'm gonna go eat a banana, peel and all next. Tree and all next.
Tree and all. Hashtag tree and all. Hashtag team tree and all. Pointing that one now. All right, everybody. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. We don't have the schedule sorted for next week yet, unfortunately. But we will let you guys know as soon as we know. So thank you guys so much for hanging out, and we will see you all. Is there anything else you want to add, Ben, before I just cap it off?
No.
All right.
Thanks for being here, everyone.
See you guys next week. You know, you could go subscribe to our Patreon. Patreon.com/calltheline. It is one of the best ways to support us. You get access to the ad-free version of the Line Has a Podcast. There are occasional like discount codes for merch, and you just get to be a supporter of the stuff we do here. Genuinely, Patreon is the most efficient way to support us. So if you like what we do here, check it out. And see you losers next week.